All right, hello everyone. I'm back with Lucas Gage on the channel for the second time, I think, or maybe third. Do you recall?
I think it's the second time.
Yeah. So last time we talked about philosophy as well, and Lucas doesn't really get to share his philosophical side as much as I think he deserves to. So he's been working on this epistemological model, the Gagean epistemological model, the GEM or GEM, and he submitted it to various journals. I appreciate the effort that he put into it. He's done a lot of research on this. So to start with, if you want, go ahead and just introduce how did you start thinking about this? Why did you think it was important? And what problem philosophically is this responding to?
Well, so first and foremost, everyone should know I'm not a trained philosopher like yourself, for example. You've studied all those books behind you. You know a lot more than me. And this very ignorance, if you will, is what allowed me to accidentally stumble upon this problem I didn't even know existed. So I was messing around with Grok and I asked Grok, like, hey, is knowledge possible without free will? And he's like, no, it's not because of these reasons. I said, really? Well, I'm a determinist, so I don't know. How do I know anything? And it's something like, well, how would you know anything? I said, well, here's how I would do it. And I explained how I would do it. And then somehow the Agrippa trilemma came up. And I said, what the hell is this trilemma? And I saw the argument. I said, no, there's something wrong with this. And I have this intuitive, that's why when I first started Pi, it was pragmatic intuitive epistemology. It was supposed to be a school of thought to defeat the trilemma. And I looked into that. You can't defeat the trilemma. It applies to specific schools of thought that want justified true beliefs. So how do you defeat that? You know, the definition of knowledge is justified true beliefs. Well, there's a problem with that. So anyway, I stumbled upon this accidentally. And knowing me, I'm like, I like challenges. I'm like, so we can't beat this thing. What can we do with it? So
Well,
I
for those
started
who don't
putting,
know, the
yeah,
trilemma is basically the idea that any belief that you have that supposedly is knowledge, it's justified true belief, that classical definition, it's going to either revert to a circular justification,
mhm,
an infinite regress, or some kind of arbitrary starting premise. I
right.
mean, where else would you ultimately fall back to in justifying a given premise? The phrase justified true belief is not the exact like Hellenistic phrase. So Plato, I think, really coins the term or the phrase rather, but his term is not justified. It is true belief with an account.
Mhm.
And that's later translated as justified true belief. Plato himself introduces this in the Theaetetus. This is a dialogue about the nature of knowledge, what exactly is knowledge. And that's the last definition that they try. They try all sorts of different ideas, what exactly knowledge is. And the last one is this true belief with an account proffered by Theaetetus, not Socrates. Socrates ultimately shoots it down, though. So the source of this concept of knowledge ultimately is seen as insufficient by Plato, and he leaves it in a kind of skeptical place. Plato specifically outlines three reasons why this notion is wrong, not the same reasons that later Agrippa the skeptic, the Puranic skeptic from the, I think, 2nd century BC, would use. Instead, he said that depending on the sense of account, it's going to be insufficient because account could just mean some set of words, and that's going to be not necessarily equating to genuine knowledge. It's going to be account in the sense of detailing analytically everything that goes into a concept. To know a word, for example, is to know all the letters, let's say. But if that's what knowledge is breaking things down to their components, then any unanalyzable simple component, like a letter, is going to be by definition unknowable. So you'll
Mm.
have a state of affairs where the ground of knowledge is unknowable, the components, but then the compound is knowable, and that's insufficient. And then I forget the third reason. But anyway, so that's where it comes from. Agrippa's trilemma was popularized in the modern day as Munchausen's trilemma, basically the same concept. And so that's the problem. That's kind of the classical
And it's
epistemological
been
issue.
haunting for so I didn't know any about this whatsoever. Just playing around with Grok. And what's crazy about Grok and any AI is that you have all the human knowledge at your fingertips. So someone like me with intuition is like, well, there's something wrong. What is wrong with it? I'm like learning as I'm creating this thing. And at first people like, bro, you're getting diluted, gaslit. It's pumping you up. The Alan Brooks phenomenon. That one guy who sat down with Chat GPT for like 300 hours or something, and it taught you're making new physics. But it's not what's happening here, because I'm testing the logic. I'm correcting it. It's correcting me. I did multiple AIs. But anyway, the point is, I stumble upon this Agrippa trilemma. I said, there's something wrong with this thing. And I go, why is it true justified belief? Well, what does that even mean? How would I conquer, or how would I, if I can't defeat the trilemma with its own terms? First of all, why are we going with justified true belief? This is not a good thing of knowledge. If we can't know T, then why are we calling it knowledge? I mean, think about it, Eric. You wouldn't call a rock food because you can't eat it. So why are we calling knowledge a justified true belief if we could never know it? So the gem does not reject absolute truth. There is something called absolute truth, but all we can know are things that we know the limit of. For example, we know mathematics. We know the analytical truths of unmarried men or bachelors because we define the terms. We know the limits. We know, for example, in the Marvel universe, Peter Parker is in fact Spider-Man. These are the things we know. We don't know the nature of the universe. So when we add the T component to justify true belief, it becomes a problem. Now, other people, the pragmatists, have said the same. What's knowledge is what's useful. I agree with that. But what about, is it reliable? So my model come out with justified reliable beliefs. We can only know what is reliable or not, and it's falsifiable, and science actually does this. But there's another thing that I discovered while I was going through this model. What about the coherent beliefs? Remember when you and I spoke for about 2 hours, you're like, what about Platonism? What about the truths and philosophies, the logic that we use? That's true. Those are coherent beliefs. So now I've given knowledge a dual warrant, meaning that there's two types of knowledge, because there's intrinsic knowledge and there's extrinsic knowledge. So you satisfy intrinsic knowledge with mathematics and analytics and things, but you can't know anything about the world unless you attest it externally. And that's what justified reliable beliefs are. So my model makes no truth claims, none whatsoever. You could have a belief that's wrong or untrue, but all my model does, it turns out, Eric, it's not a competing school of thought. It's not, well, I'm going to defeat the trilemma. It says, look, the trilemma is a boundary. This applies to any system that says, I want justified true beliefs. The problem with Agrippa he said any attempt to justify belief is going to fall on one of the three horns. I created a system that justifies the beliefs that it has without falling on any three horns, and therefore it is a false trichotomy. It's not incorrect. It doesn't apply to the gem because the gem is not seeking absolute truths. So the gem only gives you justified coherent beliefs. So P1 to P4 is satisfied justified coherent beliefs. But then if you want to know about the external world, you have to do P5, which is external testing. And that has intersubjectivity, consensus, immediate testing. Is the bridge solid? Let me check it right now. Reliable. It can't just be one time, because I think it was Jonathan Goldman. He came up with reliabilism. He's like, I'm driving by a barn. I see the barn. Well, that's enough for me. Well, what if it's a fake barn? You got to go check it out. And is it there tomorrow? So you have to be reliable and over time. And then the final judge is, this was break circularity, is that my system defeats the trilemma in three ways. Okay. One, the first axiom, the P1 is the first self-vindicating precondition. This is what I call it. It's the starting point in epistemology that no one has, for some reason, never thought of. Now, Descartes was there almost, the cogito, right? The cogito, he said, I think therefore I am. The problem with that premise is that he makes a knowledge claim or a truth claim about that thing which is thinking, plus that thinking process is my P2, the mental events. But where is that process occurring? It's within the subjective state. And every
Let's pause real quick. So just to restate, essentially Agrippa's trilemma, as classically stated, regarding justified true belief, you agree with. You're not trying to defeat that trilemma.
You cannot defeat it, because that applies to, so any system that makes a truth claim, like the universe started, that you're going to fall on the horns, because how do you know that? So mathematics doesn't do that. We know, 2 + 2 is 4. We know unmarried men are bachelors because we define the limits, right? So any systemic truth, that's what I call it, systemic. It's in a system that we know of, you can get the truth, okay? But when we don't know, let's say it's like an open system, I don't know the nature of consciousness. That's why the P1 in my subjective state does not say what the consciousness is. It just says, here's where we start. It's a description. It's not saying it is the soul, it is the cognito, it is whatever else. It says none of it. It
Right.
just says, here's where we
Just
start. Yeah.
to help retention, why don't we actually pull up
Oh, yeah.
the gem? So yeah, here you can see the title page, very well organized. How much of this was AI drafted? How much was your language?
So basically, AI wrote it out as I told it what to write out. And believe it or not, on Reddit, this is not allowed. But in academic papers, it is absolutely allowed, so long as you say, I used AI to refine language. So a lot of people are saying, you didn't make this up. No, I did. And I asked AI, wait a minute, hold on. If I'm telling you my ideas and you're writing the things out for me, how are you not the author? And it said, in philosophy, you're not, the authorship is the idea, not the description of what the ideas are. So it's different than like when I write my book here, our struggle. This I wrote every line, okay? But when you have it's like Plato or Socrates, he didn't write anything down. Does that mean he didn't do anything? Because his other Plato, right? You know, so it's like having a lawyer. It's like having a stenographer, and you're just dictate. Like, you know, Uncle H didn't write a single letter of his book, right? It was Hess. So did he not write his book? So well, that's different. That's a little bit of authorship, but this is idea. So in philosophy, like for example, the double blind peer review, you got to take away your full name, and they don't even care what did it. They just want to see, is the logic correct or not? So whoever I am, how it was written. So as long as you just go, so yes, all the terminology, when I told AI, we need to do this, it puts it out for me. And it used words I didn't even understand. I had to learn them later. That's why it's an interesting concept, because I'm learning as I'm creating this thing. But having AI is like having a 200 IQ philosopher as your buddy, you know? So instead of you doing it for me, Eric, like if I called you on the phone, hey, I got some ideas, and you went, hey, I'll write, oh, you know what that means? It means this. I go, okay. Instead of you, I got this robot doing it for me. So yeah.
That is the classical concept of authorship as well, just across the board. Like it wasn't so much who wrote even historical documents, but who came up with the account. All right. So you have 5 premises and then a conclusion. One thing. So of course, you know, from our previous discussion, you could tell I'm critical in some ways. I am glad you're doing this, because most people don't even bother to try to formulate their epistemology. They sort of just like, I know what I know because it's what I was raised with, or they just don't look any further. But you're really going at it here, and you're engaging with the tradition in a productive way, trying to do something new. But, you know, one of the things, I don't really see the structure of the argument. You list 5 premises and then the conclusion. I don't see how it necessarily follows from the premises. I think I mentioned that. So why don't you walk through how you think these premises and conclusion relate and what exactly is being claimed? So they can see it on screen. You can't, but you have premise 1 here. Let me move my video so people can see that. Okay, premise 1, axiom of subjective state. So every conscious agent has a non-arbitrary subjective state. That's something you can't avoid, sort of like the cogito you were just beginning to explain, right? Yes. So that halts the infinite regress. I'm just going to walk through all the boxes and then turn it over to you here. So premise 2, axiom of mental event. This expands beyond just there is a subjective state, but something happens in it. So the occurrence of a dynamic mental event, E, occurs within this state. And then the structural function is it triggers inquiry. And I guess that's probably related to your question to AI initially, is knowledge possible without free will? So there has to be some agent, an inquiring agent, to make sense of the knowledge acquisition process. So descriptive here. I get what you're saying. Premise 3, axiom of structural pragmatism. So inquiry necessitates the goal of resolution, and that's supposed to halt dogmatism or arbitrariness. That one's probably the least clear to me, and it'd be most interesting to me to see that fleshed out further. So premise 4, logical necessity premise. Achieving the goal, G, necessitates the application of a non-contradictory logic, L. So grants intrinsic knowledge, justified coherent belief, as opposed to justified reliable belief, which is this extrinsic versus intrinsic question. Premise 5, terminal reliability premise. Logic achieves goal if and only if the outcome is constrained by consistent, verifiable reliability. So that's supposed to transition from this coherent belief to reliable belief, or for all intents and purposes, knowledge. And then the conclusion, knowledge K is necessarily a justified coherent belief or a justified reliable belief. And you say the warranted standard for all knowledge. Yeah. And that's another point. So my two initial criticisms, I don't see the structure of the argument. And the second is you make a very strong claim, which is not only is this a description of knowledge acquisition, but it's the only possible way to justify valid beliefs in these two veins. So it's really hard to prove a negative, so we can get into that. But just to start with, then, here are your premises. Here's the conclusion. What does all this mean?
So what that is, Eric, it's not a new school of thought that says, here, I'm going to prove something. This is like me describing how to do the structural process of knowledge acquisition and warranting your beliefs. This is what everyone literally does. Everybody does this. You do it. I do it. We do this. So I've described how human beings acquire knowledge and then warrant their beliefs. It's a description. It's not a school of thought. It's not saying this is true. It's not making the universe began at this time and what's right or wrong. It's literally like Isaac Newton and I'm not saying I'm Isaac Newton. He's just describing the laws of gravity. So I found a structural, so it came off as, let me defeat the trilemma. Can't do it. Okay, sidestep it with new definition. But that definition of knowledge that I've created is justified through and through. Whereas justified true belief is not, because we can't obtain it. So epistemology is the study of how we know what we know as human agents, not AI, not animals, not you know what I mean? So this is our study of how humans acquire knowledge. And I've written the step-by-step necessary process. You can't remove one, and nor need you have to add the process. If you remove any of those processes, you fall in the five horns of the Gage pentalemma. So I have a structural defense of this. So obviously, P1, you commit the performative contradiction. Instantly, you say, well, we don't have subjective states. Okay, where are you coming from? So then in P2, in the subjective state, something. So how about this, Eric? Describe to me how you would go about finding out a belief, if you can go through it, if you want. Like, how do you yourself, just think about for a minute, how do you go step by step to find out or discover something, question something, come to the conclusion of something?
Sure. Yeah, there is going to be a tight analogy with a lot of these steps. The question, though, is this formalism the way to capture that process? Like, one contention you could have is that it's really not contingent on a subjective state, because you could deny like the objective subjective dichotomy, have some kind of process ontology where it's information reductionalism. Consciousness isn't like a real ontological category. That's what eliminative materialists would do. So if they were going to justify how they come to beliefs, they would say, it's not that there is this thing, an ontological entity, the subjective state that's there, and then things occur in it. Instead, they might start with P2 more or less and say there are these information processing events, and they build networks to predict inputs and come up with outputs to correspond with them, and then they have feedback and error correction, and that's the belief formation process.
But
that's one way.
But they're doing it from P1. So I even thought about that. I said, well, what about if I go to the Big Bang? Let's start with the Big Bang, because if I wasn't existing, or even the subconscious state, well, you don't know what's in it. So where does epistemology begin? It begins at the subjective state. Then a mental event happens to you. So I'll just go through it.
So though, you just kind of responded with an assertion. So the eliminative materialist would deny the existence ontologically. There is this thing, the subjective state. And you respond with, but it necessarily begins there. And, to be a necessary axiom, it's going to have to be indubitable, essentially.
It is indubitable, because the performative contradiction, when the guy says, we don't have a subjective state, it doesn't exist, it's an illusion, it could be an illusion. We're not making truth. If I said the subjective state is this thing, no, I'm saying there's a subjective state. It could be an illusion. Maybe it is. That's their claim. They're saying it's an illusion. They're actually making an assertion that's arbitrary. They haven't proved that it's an illusion. So I don't make that. So you see, nothing in this, the gem describes, it only describes the process. It doesn't say what P1 is. It could be a soul. It could be an illusion. It could be anything. We don't care what it is. Just like what's logic? Like, you remember you said to me on the phone, you're like, well, you're what do you call it? You're sneaking in a lot of these huge theories that you haven't proven. We're not denying logic. Of course, logic works. We're not saying this is what it is, or it's the forms, or not the forms, or it's nominal. We're saying, look, this is what we have. This is how human beings know what they know. This is how they do it. It's not making truth claims. So the eliminativist that you said, they're the ones saying, well, there's nothing there. Well, how do they know? The thing is, whatever it is where we start. So even if we start from the illusionary mind, or whatever they want to call it, they still, from P1, they're rejecting it. So, for example, I had a guy yesterday say, well, I reject yours with this ontological pre-something. What was he saying? Forgot the term, all these new jargons to me. He's like, okay, what about the heartbeat? I said, your heartbeat's not the start of knowledge. It keeps you alive. You're making a category area. You're saying that we need to be, of course we need to be alive. Where does the epistemological process of learning start? Where does that begin? In the subjective state. Now, I can deny the Big Bang. Where am I denying it from? The subjective state. I can deny that I'm alive. Where am I denying it from? The subjective state. So P1 is protected by the performative contradiction. You instantly fail immediately when you say, I don't have a subjective state. And then P2,
Yeah.
the
Sorry, I'm still going to stick on this because
no, you can, man. Listen, I'm here. This is what it's about. It's about this.
I actually agree there is such a thing as a subjective state. That's my my belief about it. But I don't think we've gotten to a demonstration that there is no possible alternative. So the key thing here is you seem to be operating on a kind of object ontology concept, the mental state as an object, like in the world of entities in your theoretical universe. I know you're saying you're not positing anything, but there is this thing that you're indicating, the mental state, assuming we can draw a box around it and capture it, and it is this fixed essence, whereas a process ontological account might not give us one mental identity. Maybe these different information processing events just network and feed off of each other, but the line you're drawing of like our subjective state as an individual, that could be illusory.
Yeah, I don't, but still you have, but how would you learn then? Then you're learning, what are you saying? That we all learn at the same time?
Yeah, we all feed off of each other and learn collectively.
Yeah, but who's we? Like that's what I'm saying. Like, this is about
matter in the universe.
But then you're just positing a massive subjective state. You see what I mean? It's inescapable, Eric, because now you're saying, okay, well, there's this network of states it's really just one state. Let's suppose only God exists. Even God learns from this state. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, P1 is inescapable, because then you have to deny God's subjective. If we're all, let's say I'm a solipsist, I'm the only person that exists. You're fake. Yeah. Everyone watching's fake. I still learn from my subjective experience. Even if I'm a brain in a vat, there's an external world that's made by a computer. I still have to do external testing. If I want to learn how to build a fake house in the fake computer system, I can still gain knowledge about how to do that. So the gem makes no claims about the external world, the nature of the world, the nature of the subjective state, because that's what you're putting on. You're saying, well, it's illusory. Maybe it is. Maybe it's completely fake. Maybe it's one big state that we're all in together. That's not the point. We all start from there. So it's it's a description. You see what I mean?
That's sort of the other issue. If it's just the term, the subjective state, and it can mean all sorts of different things, well, not having a well-defined concept that you're starting from, it's unclear exactly what even is being put forward. Like, insert X instead of the subjective state. We begin from X, and anyone necessarily begins from X, and we don't know exactly what X is, but anyone who starts is going to begin from it. It's like, that would be the same kind of logic that you're
looking for truth claims about it, Eric. You're operating from, well, because you're still going from the justified true belief definition of knowledge. You're saying, well, you don't know what that subjective state is. We don't. I don't know. Neither do you. Neither does anybody. But we don't. That doesn't mean we don't start there. Like, I don't know what logic really is. Is it the forms, Eric, or is it just a description of reality? We don't know, but it works. So remember, this is pragmatic. There's three schools here synthesized: pragmatism, rationalism, and empiricism. That's how we got away from the horns, right? So Again,
Well,
so like
what about
we
another
could,
kind of circularity here? So you're kind of alluding to the practical necessity of having the concept of logic before having a fully fledged theory of what exactly logic is, which is fair enough.
we don't reject
And
the
then
theory.
applying that to the same concept of subjectivity. Well, we work with the concept. We don't know exactly what it refers to, but what you're really doing is pointing to a whole network of other notions about subjectivity, mind, agency, and that is actually a kind of circularity because all of that is being brought in, but then all of those claims about the world are justified, you're saying, through this method from this starting point. So what's being put forward as a starting point actually is already smuggling in all of these other priors about the world. So it's
That
circular.
well, no, it's not circular because you cannot find a more fundamental starting point. So the argument is that Agrippa says that you will fall into horns if it's dogmatic arbitrarily. This is necessarily structurally we are forced to start here. I didn't say, look, I'm going to start with subjective state. No, we must start here. So it doesn't matter what it is, what's smuggling in. Okay, we don't know again, you're going off the nature of it. You want to know the ultimate truth of it. It has, it's neurons. Is it the soul? That doesn't matter. We must start here, whatever it is. We must start at P1. And the performative contradiction says it is necessary. So if it were arbitrary, like the cogito, right? He goes, well, I think therefore I am. Well, what's thinking? How do you know you're thinking? Why not feel therefore I am? Why not? You could just keep going down. He was almost there. He was almost there. And then he makes a jump. Therefore, God exists. What? How did you get there? So he made a lot of mistakes, but he was almost there. He knew I can't doubt my own existence. Wonderful. But you made a truth claim about it. I don't do that. And I go I go to a step deeper than him.
Well,
I go the container where the cogito lives or the thoughts happen. So let me just show you what I'm saying here. Look.
But there is a truth claim there that we start from the subjective state. That's a truth claim.
Well, that's like an analytic, that's like a epistemological process of things. It's not saying that because, well, then if this is not true, and I tell people this, I was telling people on Reddit, give me the non-arbitrary axiomatic model where you don't fall on the horns. They can't. They just go, you're wrong. Okay, why am I wrong? Tell me what, give me your model. Well, we don't have, okay, no crap, because this is the first one. So let me just explain how, look, this is what description, what people do, okay?
Sure.
I exist right now. Okay, I'm sitting here and I'm in a subjective state, right? Do we agree? Okay, yes. Boom, something happens. Explosion. What was that? That's the mental event, the perception, or even a thought. I wonder why she yelled at me. Something happens, okay? It's a dynamic mental event because the conscious mind is not static, okay? It's just, there are things, we could argue it is, but something happens where it changes the state from one, so it's a signal. What was that? I don't know what that was. Then I have to use coherent logic. Well, first of all, triggers inquiry. You might say, well, that's dogmatic, it's arbitrary. No, because the goal of inquiry is to find answers. It's not the goal of inquiry is to go fishing. The goal of inquiry is to find out, what am I inquiring about? So that's not arbitrary. That was the dogmatism horn. I'll give you two examples. When I had P1 a long time ago, Andrew Wilson said, I said, it's a brute fact. He goes, I reject brute facts. I said, When you had on the phone with me, you were hitting P3, right? Remember, you were saying, well, why are you choosing the goal to defeating the trilemma is arbitrary? Why do you want to do that, right? So I had to go, that's a good one, Eric. You're right. Why I don't have. So the goal of inquiry itself is to find resolution. It's to find an answer. That's what it is, right? So once you trigger inquiry, you have to find an answer. Now, one guy went to me, well, what if I don't want to know the answer? Well, then you exit the epistemological realm. You no longer want to learn, so that doesn't matter. This model doesn't apply to you. But if you want to know the answer, you have to seek the resolution. Now, you hear an explosion, okay? Coherence. Okay, well, that didn't sound like a cat. Cats go meow. That went boom. I've heard booms before. It sounded like a bomb. Was that a firecracker? Was it a gas explosion? Justified coherent belief, that's an explosion. Now, in order for me to check, if it is I have to go outside and check. So I'm at P4 right now. I have a justified coherent belief. That's not a cat, because I can't have non-contradictory logic. I can't sit here and have different thoughts that don't make any sense whatsoever. It will never get to the goal. In fact, not only do I have to have coherent belief about the explosion being not a cat, that I have to, well, if I want to go check it out, I need to think of a coherent logic to, okay, number one, let me get my shoes on. Let me go check it out. Let me go toward the site. And then I can't just go one time and check. I have to make sure and look at the evidence, the testing. Maybe I bring my family, my wife. Hey, did you hear that too? Because what if she didn't hear it and I did? Okay. So you go check and then you do an external test. And this test, again, reliability. So this is where science comes in, right? So science has given us a lot in this world. Science is basically P1 to P5. And no one has ever written it out for science. Science has never had its justification ever until Gem. Because what happens with philosophers is, well, that's dogmatic. Why'd you start with the hypothesis? Why are you doing it? Good point. And science would go, well, you're just jibber jabber. Who cares about your nonsense? Well, philosophy gave birth to science. Gave birth to philosophy gave birth to science, and they're still used for philosophy. Like science can't give us an ought, right? So we learn animals suffer like we do. Ought we keep eating them or not? Well, maybe we need to discuss it with the philosophical debate on ethics. So I think philosophy still has a powerful position in ethics and law and things like this. But when it comes to the nature of the universe, neither science nor philosophy can know because we don't know the ultimate truth. So all science can give us is justified, reliable beliefs. Now that's how science works until it's falsified. So this is what it is until a better model replaces it. So it's reliable. If it's no longer reliable, it becomes not true to us. It's no longer knowledge. Oh, that's not right. Coherence, again, 2 + 2 is 4. That sounds like an explosion. I could stop right there, right? But if I want to know about the external world, I have to go to P5. Now, P5 breaks circularity. If I stopped at P4, then my model's circular. But P3 shows it's not dogmatic because into the inquiry process is about getting an answer. To say otherwise, you'd have to say, no, it's not. And then when I get to P4, I have coherent beliefs, but then P5 breaks circularity. Otherwise, if I try to make a truth claim about the world outside without P5, it is circular. And that's what Descartes did. Oh, well, I exist, therefore God. Well, how do you know? You just said that. That's a dogma. So my model transcends the trilemma. I want people, and the word dissolve, you don't put solve. Solve means you defeat it on a ground. Dissolve means it's irrelevant for this. So I've dissolved it. And so I put it in academia edu. People are reading it. Professionals are reading it. I did submit in peer review. It has to be processed right now. So obviously there's going to be like high, philosophers, epistemologists. I don't want to say what magazine or journal because I don't want to get it like nuked, but they're going to be looking into this with a fine-tooth comb. And I expect, pushback. I like that I'm here with you talking about it and you're giving me pushback. And look, I'm not a trained academic, but I've learned enough about this. In fact, it's my intuition brought me here. My intuition is actually proving the model to be the case. It's kind of strange like that. And I said,
okay, so before I go further into challenging the individual premises and some other questions, can you kind of illustrate what the structure of this argument, because you call it a syllogism, typically those are, major premises, minor premises, and then some conclusion that follows from the premises in some kind of logical structure. So here we don't really have that illustrated. You list premises and then there is a conclusion, but how do they connect?
Well, so again, from the subjective state, you start there. From there, you have a mental event. This is not arbitrary. This literally happens. That's what it means to be conscious. You must have if you do not have mental events, you're basically unconscious. You're not there, right? So you start with a subjective state. Necessarily follows. This is all necessary. See, this every single one, Eric, is necessary. It's a chain. It's all connected and it's all axiomatic. So P1 starts with the subjective state. A mental event.
I don't see the logical necessity though. So I'm asking about the logical structure as an account of knowledge acquisition. The sequence of events makes sense, but as a structure of an argument, I don't see like what premises doing what, how they connect.
So I don't know if this is a law. It's not an argument. It's not making any truth claims. It's just saying this is. I know it's hard to say law. I know people say it's. In fact, that's why I named it the structural mandate. I didn't want to say law and let these people look at it, but it is a law. It's describing what happens. It's just like Isaac Newton. And I'm not saying I'm Isaac. I'm just saying I don't know how else to explain it. It's like saying, look, this is how you do this. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom. And that's how you get knowledge and you warrant for those beliefs.
Okay.
So
that's I would say it's not exactly a syllogism is my
right. It's not like saying this is the world's the truth about God. There's no argument. It's saying I don't even know if this should have been written in a syllogism, but apparently that's how it's done. So I did, but it shows you the step, and it all connects because you can't remove anything. And if you attack anything, you fail. So attacking P1, perform a contradiction. Attacking P2, it's a functional contradiction. You're saying that a mental state doesn't have dynamic events. There's no changes in it. It's static. Well, that's not the case. If you deny P3, you go into dogmatism, because then why? What do you mean? You're just saying it's not. Inquiry doesn't. What does it equal then? What's the point of it? So that's necessary, because the definition of inquiring is to find answers. And P4, you're saying I could achieve a solution or know something with incoherent logic. That's refuting yourself. And then P5, you're arguing that, well, we don't need external testing to learn about the outside world. So in other words, to defeat the pi, the syllogism, you have to argue the following: that a human being can acquire knowledge in an unconscious state without mental events, without the goal of trying to acquire knowledge, without coherent logic, and when they want to learn about the world, zero external testing. And as you can see, that's an impossible thing to do. And the Gage pentalemma defends every premise from attack, right? Okay. Every one of them. So that's the defense.
Well, we should look at the pentalemma. Let's first look at some of these premises. And I wouldn't say that the only way to reject this is to deny every premise. You could deny one premise, or rather than outright like contradicting the premise, you could use an alternative conception and say we shouldn't be calling this a subjective state. Instead, we should just start with the inquiry process, period, whatever the substrate of that process is. That's one way to go about it.
To beat the trilemma, though, you need to have a non-arbitrary start. You must have, because then the skeptic will go, why'd you start with inquiry? I mean, because that's what Descartes started. I think therefore I am, right? He started with the cogito. That's not good enough for them, because there was a fundamental state. So again, my goal was to defeat the trilemma. I couldn't defeat it on its own terms, because you can't, because it's a boundary, right? But then I come up with the whole, think about this. The trilemma is like the sidelines, but the gem is the actual football field. It's all of that. And this is how you play the game. These are the rules of the game. And every football player does that. That's what this is. So it's not so I think when you're coming at me, not me personally, obviously, but the gem, it's like you're looking for, well, what about the subject? What does that mean? And no, it has nothing to do with that. This doesn't even deny Platonism or God or Christianity, but you need to go through these steps to even come to Platonism. You're coherent.
I think you're going to have to go through steps very similar to these. I don't know if this is the one precise formulation. So another way of looking at one of these premises would be the logic premise. Maybe instead of looking for coherence logically in coming up with an account of an event that we're trying to inquire about, we could instead look at statistical prediction. So we compare what is happening to an ensemble of similar events, and then we make a prediction on the basis of that kind of statistical process, similar to what AI does. So there, it's not really referencing logical coherence, because we could have logically contradictory expectations, but then hold those at the same time in a Bayesian way, in a probabilistic way, and say, well, given what I see, either A or B could happen, and A is not logically contradictory relative to B, or sorry, could be. Or you could have different theories that have mutually contradictory logic, but you're using both of them in a probabilistic way, and that's actually how we go about the inquiry process and coming up with predictions and accounts.
Someone threw out antheologic, it was paratheologic or atheologic logic, where it's like paradoxes are accepted. They're totally fine. They don't destroy the system locally. Even that is coherent. So there's a system of rules. So coherence, not the non-contradiction is the minimum. It's the minimum, right? You can't do two things at the same time to find the answer. You know what I mean? Like, you got to pick one. Okay, I'm going to go there. So the non-contra is the minimum requirement of logic. It's not the law of identity, what you could throw in there, but the non-contradictory. But even the systems you're talking about, they have to be coherent. You're not going to have statistics based on incoherence. You could have probabilities. You could, I don't know, maybe it's A or B or C. Sure, but that system is coherent. It's not incoherent. Otherwise, you can't use it. It would not give you results. So again, P4 is about coherence in general. At the minimum, the agent must use non-contradictory logic to come even to a conclusion at all. They cannot hold A and B. They cannot hold two dissimilar beliefs at the same time because they never come to the resolution. If I say the cat's dead or alive, like Schrodinger's cat, well, you got to inspect it at some point. You could hold it. I don't know, but that's not that's coherent. That I don't know.
I think people do kind of hold mutually contradictory beliefs though at the same time very often. So
But
I don't think the chief thing.
isn't it?
Yeah, but they do it anyway,
But it
and
doesn't
they get
include the
along with
goal.
it.
But say then they don't have knowledge, Eric. See what I'm saying?
Right.
That's my point. So
But
you
right,
cannot
okay.
achieve the knowledge. You don't have the JCB, the justified current belief, if you're just sitting in limbo. Well, the cat's dead or not? I don't know. Okay, you don't know yet. Exactly. You do not know the state of the cat until you find out in some way. Now you look into the box, he's dead or not dead. Okay. But you see what I'm saying? Even I've tried it, man. I've tried it multiple times.
Let me zoom in a little bit more.
Sure.
So all of these, when we fully flesh them out, a statistical method obviously has to be coherent to get full knowledge in the proper sense. Then, you'll probably need some kind of coherent system.
Yes.
But then in this particular process, going from there's an event that is unaccounted for, we have inquiry about the nature of that event, which basically we're trying to come up with an account. We're coming up with what comes before this, what comes after this. And if we think that knowledge is just dealing in that domain of prediction and response, like some people basically do, they boil down knowledge to that, then what we're looking for is not logical coherence between the event and then some proposed explanation for the event or prediction following from the event. It's not about logical coherence. Instead, it's the strength of various signals in a neural network. So a neural network is not looking for logical coherence in order to make its predictions. Instead, it is this kind of map of various intensities at various points that preserves an initial signal and is good at replicating a signal. So it's just a totally different concept than we're dealing with classical logic. We're looking for logical coherence. Maybe it's about preserving the fidelity of signals and signal intensities or something like that, rather than what we are doing with the fourth step here, once we get to inquiry, is trying to apply this non-contradictory logic. Like maybe that's not really the essential thing here. Maybe that's part of it.
I mean, can you demonstrate that being necessary? So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, and is that even a human thing? Are you talking about AI? Are you talking about robots? So this is, again, study of how we know what we know, not what AI knows.
What if it's propositional? Propositional knowledge might depend on non-contradictory logic because we're constrained in how we can articulate our knowledge in language to the structure logically of language, and contradiction just won't hold there. But a more like ingrained sense of knowledge, like knowing how to walk, I'm not looking for logical coherence in inquiring into these signals. It's more about conformity to this ensemble of prior experience and trying to lock in. What?
You're talking about instincts.
Well, that's not, I mean, you learn how to walk. It's partly guided by instincts too.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's not, when you're learning how to walk, that's like an experiential knowledge. That's like a know-how knowledge. We're talking about that's not a belief. Learning how to walk is not a belief. You see what I mean? So this, again, this knowledge is a justified, reliable belief, justified, coherent belief. Knowing how to walk, or now someone could say, how do you know you're walking the best way? Some skeptic, how do you know I know how to tie my shoe. How do you really know how to tie your shoe? Is that the best method? That's a truth claim about the best method of tying shoes or knowing how to walk, but that's a different type of know-how. Whereas this, we're talking about believing things about the world, and that's why it's not the same. I know where you're going. And again, I tested all this myself. I tried to figure out how to debunk it. You're like, well, let's
test it together. So suppose that the pre-propositional, pre-belief kind of know-how is based on this kind of intensity of predictive signals and expectation. What's the school of thought in modern behavioral psychology that's really popular for this. I've looked into a little bit. Vervaeke's talked about it. Predictive processing. Anyway, so predictive processing is this, like, fill in what I'm not explaining well and just use that as the example model, where it's not about logical coherence. It's about this predictive weighting and in neural net structures. So suppose that's how know-how is generated, and then propositional knowledge and everything else is scaled up from that. So we basically work from predicting stimuli and coming up with behaviors to narrow the field of possibilities. And that's also, like, we're testing for salience as well, and we consider things true or useful if it helps us in making accurate predictions of what a behavior will do. So we attune to those things, but it's not about logical coherence. It's about coherence with previous experience. And then we, by analogy, scale up from those physical processes of learning and knowing into a more abstract space. It's just various levels of abstraction on top of this fundamentally statistical predictive kind of thing. And logic, propositional logic that's applied, is basically, this is one possibility, I'm not saying this is what I believe, is a confabulation or retconning, where from the perspective of rational linguistic agents, we think that we come up with our knowledge on the basis of this logical system. But actually, we come up with what we really know from the bottom up with all these predictive processes, and then kind of just put it in a bow in a logical system in order to express it.
Right. Let's grant that there's a whole neural network. We don't have it. That's like saying what the subjective state is. You're describing the nature of the thing that comes out as logic to us. And I'm saying, okay, whatever that is, Eric, maybe you're right. Maybe it's a neural network that we don't even know about going on in the background, deep down in the subconscious. And who knows, maybe there's a human consciousness across the planet or something. I don't know. Either way, it comes to the surface for us to use non-contradictory logic. So that's what I'm trying to say. There's no way out of this, because no matter what you explain how this thing is, like, let's suppose mathematics comes from the forms. Let's just argue that you're right. Platonism is 1,000% true. Okay. We still have to use the math. Doesn't matter if it's the forms or it's some other thing. The gem makes no claims about the nature of the things we use, other than we use them. So the agent, even though if this logic goes into some deep neural net processor, like you just said, it still is used the way this is how we use it. So like I said earlier, Eric, remember I said, why don't we call rock something? We don't call it food because we can't eat it, right? Otherwise we would. So the same thing with logic. I don't know what logic is. Do you? I don't know. We don't even know what energy is. We don't know what gravity is, but we could describe it. So we are P3 or P4, actually P4, describes what the agent needs in order to do anything from there, no matter what that P4 actually is. And that's what I'm saying to you. So I maybe you're right. There could be all this other stuff. It could be predictions. It could be statistics. But all of that, Eric, must be coherent itself. Otherwise, it won't work. It's not incoherent. It's not like, well, all this stuff just arbitrarily does stuff, and then we get to a coherent point. It makes no sense.
Right.
That is also coherent.
Right. So coherence is another one of these concepts that's sort of functional, and it's basically an analogical concept. Like, we understand coherence loosely, heuristically, where things fit together. Like, oh, that account, it coheres with this other account. Or from, like, physics, this wave coheres, as in constructively interferes with this other wave. Rather than decoheres, I guess. And yet, in the logical case, to say that it's coherent or not coherent, are we saying something all that meaningful if we don't know what makes something logically coherent or not?
Well, again, you're going with values and claims about the nature of things. I mean, that's not the purpose of the gem. And I'm not. And if I were making those claims, you could say the gem is false. So if I make a single truth claim about what you're saying, like, well, actually, logic is not what Eric just said, then you can say, wait a minute, how do you know it's not? I'm just saying we have to use at minimum non-contradictory logic. That is, you cannot, as a human being, remember, epistemology is the study of how we know what we know, not what is out there or some other thing. This is how we human beings acquire and justify, or rather warrant our beliefs. That's all it is. Nothing more. And that's why people are confused. Like, you think you're smarter than the rest of the world and Descartes. No, I'm just saying, look, I just stumbled upon this thing as a non-academic scholar. And because I'm not a non-academic, it allowed me to see the whole scope. See, as I didn't jump in here as an empiricist, or I didn't jump in here as a rationalist or anything. I just said, well, imagine like some guy, you know, he's like, you're at like a fishing dock and you see these guys tying knots and you're like, you walk by, you're not even a fisherman. Like, why are you guys tying it like that? This is a lot easier like this. And the guy goes, what, where are you from, bro? I don't know what. You just solved this knot problem. We've had it for 2,000 years. How? I don't know. I don't know what the hell this, it just looks stupid. You know, that could happen. And a lot of discoveries in the world are that. Like, I don't think people are looking for things, and they, like, if I strike gold, if I strike oil in my backyard, I didn't know it was there. It's like, am I a genius? No. So a lot of people think that in order to learn the truth or know something or discover, you have to be a genius from Oxford University. I'm not that guy. I just have this intuition. You know, you and I have spoken many times. I have this intuition that's like the tag argument. You know, when I first heard it from Jay Dyer, I was like, damn, that's pretty strong. I'm like, no, wait a minute. There's something wrong here. That's a false dilemma, because they're saying either God exists or knowledge is impossible. What if there's a, like Kastrup puts out there, a subjective, you know, idealist state where that these concepts can float around in? Why does it have to be a personal God? Why? And I realized that without knowing anything. So I had this gut feeling like the tag is, and then you look into the tag, it's very weak, actually. It's circular. It's a false dilemma. So, you know, there's an intuition for me.
I think they're good formulations, but yeah. So let's go back to P4 and look at this. So, because you're making a very strong claim, not just that we go through these steps, but that there's no other way to get to bona fide knowledge. So you say achieving the goal necessitates the application of a non-contradictory logic. So looking at that, I agree that to articulate propositional knowledge for other people to accept what we're saying, we're going to have to formulate our sentences in ways that don't contradict each other. We're going to have to apply a non-contradictory logic to express our knowledge. But is that in the expression? What about things that don't evidently have a logical structure, like knowledge about sense experience, phenomenological claims, like insight into the nature of subjectivity, or very simply, like the nature qualitatively of the color red? So inquiry leads me to recognize there are different hues, and then insight or examination into the phenomenon, just simple attention, leads me, and that's the inquiry process. Rather than bringing in logic linguistically, inquiry leads me to recognize how red differs from the other colors. I might even non-verbally recognize some kind of opposition between some of the colors and relationships between other colors, and map it in a space that does encode some kind of genuine knowledge about the nature of the color wheel or color spectrum. But I didn't bring in logic, and yet in that moment, like, did I know about the qualitative nature of redness? Sort of like the thought experiment where there's the color researcher who knows everything that can be logically described or said about color, like the leading scientist on color, and yet she herself, it's a woman in the example, but is colorblind. So does she actually know everything there is to know about color, or is she missing something that is purely qualitative and not a logical proposition at all? So
I don't know if that does anything to the process of the model, because again, this is the nature of knowing the color red. And then again, when you said the palettes, you're able to logically discern, oh, that's not the same red as that red. There's a language going on. That red is not the same. Even if you didn't speak, there's still a sense, there's an intuition.
Well, when you talk about it, yeah, certainly. But what if that's post hoc, and the actual insight or knowledge about the phenomenon is pre-linguistic and pre-logical?
Well, it's, how do you have a when you say that's not red in your head, even to yourself. I don't think you don't
If you're
speak
using words, yeah, but
well, yeah, that's the logic. You were saying that's not red. That's a different red. Unless you're in like a pure meditative state, like some Buddhist guy. I don't know. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think
So,
the verbal description follows some kind of intuitive insight into the
right.
qualia
And it
themselves.
can't be, look, you can't say, here's what I'm saying. You can't say, let's use your example. I'm going through this state. I see this red. If I go, it's the same red as the other red, and it's not, that's contradictory. If I notice this red is darker than this red, I go, it's the same. No, it's not. That's not true. So, and that's contradictory in my own head without even going to the external world. And that would be a justified coherent belief if it passes P4's coherence. And you can't say to yourself, these are the two, you can't even lie to yourself and say
Here,
these are the same colors.
so what you're describing is using logic as a test to ensure that whatever you're coming up with is, a
Coherent. Yeah.
candidate for knowledge. But the way you
Yes.
phrase it here, achieving the goal necessitates the application of a non-contradictory logic. But the goal, as that coherence, or how do you phrase the goal state? You say that the occurrence of a dynamic mental event occurs within the state. Inquiry necessitates the goal. Maybe it's in your like longer description of P2. You talk about like there being a lack of resolution, and then the inquiry process is wanting to have that resolved.
Yes.
Well, if the goal is the resolution of that inquiry process, then strictly speaking, you could attain that goal at the level of that intuitive insight into the qualia before you go on to apply a logical framework on top of it. So logic may be necessary, but it's not necessarily what achieves the goal if the goal is like coming to your own explanation in your mind of an unexplained mental event.
But now you have belief that you have two different colors of red without any, you see what I mean? It doesn't affect the model. It's still the same process.
But the way you phrase it here makes it sound like the knowledge is generated here by the logic. Whereas I think it's fair to say that it's a necessary test. It must be logical, but is the logic itself, the application of the law of non-contradiction, what generates the insight or knowledge?
You can't justify that belief without the coherent logic. You can't even justify it. So it cannot be a justified coherent belief if there's no coherent logic. That's the point of P4.
Right. To go beyond P4, that's where you're going to need to apply some kind of logic to externalize it and make it into propositions. But that's not exactly what's written here. So you say achieving the goal, which is you didn't define the goal in this. I want to find your P3 breakdown because the language in these things makes all the difference. So
you're right, and that's
you
why
say
this is good. If there's any if there's any
so
language,
they can see it on screen here. So P3 is the axiom of structural pragmatism. G, inquiry necessitates the goal of resolution. Okay, so if the goal is resolution, think about you're dealing with these qualia of different color phenomena. You notice, not logically, not attending to any logical structure, but simply the various intensities. You notice difference, and not like logical distinction, but just qualitative difference. And to account for that or to resolve this, let me read the next paragraph too. So you say inquiry is triggered by the mental event and is defined as the process of moving from a state of uncertainty to a state of resolved certainty. By the principle of structural necessity, the process of I must necessarily have a goal, resolution. So you define the goal as resolution into certainty from a state of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So if that's so, and you're talking about needing logic to go into justifying a belief, right? But you're not at the level of P4, the way it's stated, you're saying that logic allows you to achieve the goal. But I'm saying it's very possible that in many cases, the goal of resolving uncertainty through these processes of inquiry is prior to the application of any logical framework.
Yeah, but you need the logic to confirm that. Like, so you're saying, okay, I have intuition of these colors. I'm not thinking about that. I have these gut feelings like that red is different than that red. Once you do that process and you conclude, okay, that red is different from that red, that is coherent logic. Now you have the belief that you have two different reds.
But you didn't. Okay, let's use another example.
Sure.
A
Am I missing
face
something?
at
Like,
a
what
you're
is it I'm
seeing a
missing?
face at a
Yep.
distance. You're not
Yeah.
sure if it's someone you know or not.
Yeah.
As they approach, as you're examining this, trying to go from uncertainty to certainty, you all of a sudden recognize who it is.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't take the application of non-contradictory logic. To articulate it after the fact, to put it into words, you're going to have to use propositions that aren't contradictory. That's true. But I don't think that's how you recognize a face.
Okay, so you're saying that there's a well, that's like a intrinsic, I guess, intuition that you acquire you don't know the face, you see the guy go, oh, it's not like there he is. There could be that, but there doesn't have to be that, right? They're saying there doesn't have to be a sentence in your head.
Right.
Just looking at the person, you have a gut feeling, okay, that's Bob or that's Eric. And that was achieved without non-contradictory logic. The thing is, you must have at minimum non-contradictory logic. That's what, again, that
To
is
go
the.
beyond that state.
But even because you can't say it's him and not him at the same time, even that feeling is like a logic in a sense. You cannot say that is Eric and not Eric at the same time. I'm noticing Eric and not Eric at the same time.
Well, that's sort of what the state of uncertainty is you're noticing these conflicting signals and then it
But then,
resolves into
yes, but
something.
then but it cannot be incoherent though. That's what I'm trying to say. So maybe you're right. There could be, once the peer review, they might even come at me like, hey, even worse than what you're doing, right? If this is even wrong, but I'm still, it doesn't break the model because still what you're saying is, because look, it's saying that P3, where are you at? P4? We're at P4,
P4.
right? So you're seeing a guy walk at you. I can't see his face. I don't know who he is. That's the intuition without the logic in there. But there's still a process that is logical because I don't know who he is. Now I see his face. Now I know who he is. I still don't see it removes the opposite, which would be that I still don't know who he is. I now know who he is. So whether I articulate, and by the way, intrinsic knowledge, you don't who are you talking to? Nobody. It's you, right? So it's not like you have to articulate to yourself, I know who he is. That's a gut feeling. That's still a logic. That's still a sequential. There's still a syntax there going on, even if it's emotional. You see, so it can't be this, it can't be, I look at him, I still don't know who he is, and I do know who he is. That's a non-contract. You cannot have that. So you can't, so the belief that it's you at first, it's not you. I don't know who that is. Okay. Then I see it's Eric. Oh, it's not even a belief though. That's what, yeah, this is not a belief, Eric. This is, that's a no. Okay, I see where you're going. So this is not dealing with that kind of knowledge. That's an intrinsic, that's not the same as not knowing something. So like, you feel happy around somebody. This model does not acquire that. That's not a belief. So there are things that are instantly like, this model doesn't deal with. So that's what I get what you're doing. Okay, yeah, you're right. So what you're talking about is something that you just know internally by instinct or intuition or qualia. Like there's no model that's going to say you're not having a good time or you don't enjoy this ice cream. P4, you don't like the ice cream. You could think that, but this is something that you gain I don't know, what's the knowledge where you just have it intuitively. It's not, this is not a belief, Eric. So the problem was I didn't see you in the mist. I don't know who that is. That's true. I don't know who this is. Here's Eric. Oh, it's Eric. Now I know it's you. I don't need to deny it or not. I know. Now I could argue, and if you want to go to truth claims, is that really Eric though? But that's not where we're going, you see? So again, the process has been done. From my subjective state, there's a mental event. I see a figure in the mist. It's not someone I don't know. They come closer to me. I identify, I wonder who that is. P3, P4. Oh, it's Eric. That's logical. It can't be not Eric because it is Eric. P4 is satisfied but it's not even a belief. You see what I mean? So you're saying that is a form of knowledge that my model does not account. That's what you think you're saying.
Well, the way that you have P4 phrased makes it seem like the goal of resolving into certainty, just taking a phenomenological description
Mhm.
of all of this, starting from a subjective state,
Yeah,
an
yep.
event happens that you're uncertain about. Inquiry is initiated with the goal of resolving into certainty.
Yes.
Now, that happens in the case of recognizing a face,
Yeah.
but it doesn't happen because you apply non-contradictory logic in any ordinary sense of the term. Now, we can adjust what you mean by logic because in a very broad sense, any process that is applied, even a physical process to resolve from one state to another state, could be called a logical
Yeah,
process.
but it's
Really, like
non-contradictory is the
nothing
point.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even contradictory logical statements are like resting on a deeper framework that must be logical,
Mhm.
in the sense that, like, okay, I say
The sentence is false.
John is white, and then I say John is not white. Those are
Yeah.
contradictory statements, but they subsist within a deeper, coherent, non-contradictory logic of language itself, or at a deeper level than that, just that there is like physicality itself embodies the principle of exclusion, where you have to be one thing or not
Mhm.
that thing, and that's just inescapable. So,
Yes.
but then you're stretching the notion of what you mean by logic pretty broadly. So, in that sense, I mean, any activity necessitates the application of a non-contradictory logic.
That's correct. Yes, that's exactly what that is.
Okay, well, if it applies to everything, then it no
I mean,
longer.
do you think that is there a better way to say what you think I'm meaning in your view? Like, how would you word P4 then? If this to solve your issue, you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So articulating the certainty arrived at necessitates the application of a non-contradictory logic. So converting from a state of certainty internally to a propositional claim, that requires logic in the typical sense.
Right, but how would you okay, because P4 is basically saying the goal achieved, right? What is missing there for you? Like, in other words, how would you have
Well,
worded it better?
so you say
Because I
achieving
think,
the goal. The
yeah,
goal is the state of certainty. So when you recognize the face, that's a state of certainty. But I
yeah.
wouldn't say in a normal sense that that requires the application of non-contradictory logic. I would say to articulate to someone else who it is that you recognized, then you must apply non-contradictory logic to convert it from that direct insight where the goal as defined has been achieved to propositional knowledge. That is where you apply
But also, Eric, I
logic.
think that you're still in P3 when you're trying to figure out who that guy is. That's inquiry. It doesn't say inquiry needs the logic exactly, right? It's saying that there's a process of inquiry. Part of that inquiry is looking at this guy, not knowing he is. And then once you know it's him, you're going to say to yourself in some way, that is Eric. Whether you say it out loud or not, they're no that ends the non-contradict. That's the one I'm saying. You cannot say both. It is Eric and not Eric. So I think you're missing P. Your example is still in P3. It's the process of inquiry. I don't know who that guy is. Let me find out. I'm walking closer to him. Oh, it's Eric. There you go. I'm at
Mhm.
P4 because it can't not be Eric anymore because my gut tells me it's Eric. You're saying there was no logic involved to get to that point. That's what you're saying. There was some kind of
Yeah.
intuition.
So even in this example here, you
Mhm,
basically say that at some point, once the recognition occurs, resolution occurs, then you
mhm.
say to yourself. So that's the step that is not explicit in what you're saying.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if adding that or not is going to make a difference because again, these no matter how much I refine the language, because this syllogism I literally did like 11 versions, I think some crazy number because of conversations like this to refine. But what the refinement does is only preempt these critiques, and it still doesn't break the model down because even if this is the case, well, look, you didn't account for this one thing. It doesn't stop the process of obtaining knowledge and warranting those beliefs. It doesn't do this. So it's in other words, P4 is not false still. You know what I mean? And if you look at the
Okay.
look at the
So
pentalemma, see if you look at the
mhm.
pentalemma.
We're almost done with the premises
Oh
the
yeah, no,
first
keep going.
time.
Yeah, of
So
course. I
let's,
want
yeah,
to keep
let's keep
sure,
going and then
sure.
go to the pencil lemma. So premise 5,
Mhm.
logic achieves goal if and only if the outcome is constrained by consistent verifiable reliability. This also seems to kind of conflate some of these steps, because the goal, as defined, is a state of resolution in phenomenological terms. The goal doesn't refer to, all you say here is inquiry necessitates the goal of resolution, and then by the principle of structural necessity, the process of I must necessarily have a goal, resolution. So inquiry requires resolution, and that's how you define it. That's where you leave it. And I would say that if you want goal to be deferred all the way down to premise 5, you say logic achieves the goal if and only if the outcome is constrained by consistent verifiable reliability. Well, then, as stated here, justified coherent beliefs don't attain that goal.
Of P5, yeah.
Okay, right, but goal was just defined as G, and the goal is simply coming to a resolution of uncertainty that the inquiry was based on, right?
Yeah.
So is it when you get to justified coherent belief, say, I guess the redness example is one, or you're looking at like a square in your mind and you're simply like counting, you're not sure how many corners are in a square, and you're counting in your mind how many corners are in the square that you're visualizing. Well, the uncertainty you want to resolve into certainty, but there, is it constrained by...
I see. If I'm giving dual warrant, there must be two different goals. That's what you're saying.
It looks like it.
Yeah, that might be actually something I have to go fix then and resubmit before these people, because I did add the justified coherent beliefs and justified literally was like a day or two before I submitted. I was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with knowledge. And therefore I probably didn't update the syllogism correctly to make sure there's two different, because I assume there, when you say the goal is achieved when we have coherent beliefs. But if you want to know about the extrinsic world, you have to go outside and break circuit. And therefore that belief becomes a justified reliable. That's why the warrant transition, I think it covers it actually. That warrant transitions to JRB if you want to know knowledge, but you're saying this might confuse people unless there's two different goals.
Yeah, because you say logic achieves goal if and only if the outcome. Yeah. So you would have to rephrase and say achieves both levels of the goal. But then also saying logic achieves the goal there, that's an etiological statement or a causative statement that I don't think is warranted yet. If you necessarily must have a logical structure to the explanation leading to resolution into certainty, that doesn't mean that it's the logic that is achieving the goal itself. So I think that remains to be proven.
And what, P4 or P5?
In P5 now.
In P5, the goal is it's the restrained. It's the ultimate judge of reality. It's falsifiable. It's intersubjectivity. It's you taking your belief and you're putting it against the test of reality itself. That's what determines JRB, not just the coherent logic from P4. You're taking that coherent logic from P4, and then you're testing it against reality, and it must be falsifiable. And if it's unreliable, it's not knowledge. If it is reliable over time,
I get that.
You
I mean? I understand that distinction. What I'm saying is, as stated, you say logic achieves the goal if and only if the outcome is constrained by consistent verifiable reliability. But what you're saying is logic achieves the goal. So what is it that achieves the goal? You say logic does it. A weaker statement that would be easier to back is that the presence of logic or logical coherence is a necessary precondition of the goal at this level at least being realized.
So when I updated this thing, I have to strengthen and update even the syllogism transitioning from each one. That's what you're saying. So I think your critiques are, you're saying, okay, P4 is good, but then that's a specific goal. So there should be two goals, goal 1, goal 2. right? That's one fix that needs to be
Well,
done.
no, I would actually, there's three levels there. I would say you can have certainty where, as defined, the goal is simply resolution into certainty. And that
Mhm.
is not necessarily a like propositional belief. So you're dealing with goal, which as defined applies all the way down at the level of recognizing a face. And then you're kind of maintaining the same concept. There are three different concepts there. There's resolution into certainty, which is what you've defined. And then there is the goal of justified coherent belief. So having coherent belief does necessitate that it conforms with non-contradictory logic.
Mhm.
Sure. And then going beyond that to justified reliable belief, that goal of that kind of knowledge, like they're three different entities: goal 1, 2, and 3. And so the where I diverge basically from how you say it here is at P4, where you say achieving the goal necessitates the application of a non-contradictory logic. And I would say it should be clarified that moving from a resolution into certainty into propositional coherent knowledge or belief, that must accord with non-contradictory logic. And then the second thing that I said there was logic achieves goal. That's too strong of a causative statement where you're treating logic like it's the agent of change there. And we don't know that from what you've said so far.
Okay, so it should be then. Okay. So P4 logic is fine in P4, but if I'm saying that the external world determines whether or not your belief is reliable, it's no longer the logic that achieves the goal. That's what you're saying.
Well, I would say that it's not clear that it's logic that achieves the goal in any case. We can tell, I think fairly you could claim that non-contradictory logic is a necessary precondition of converting from that base level goal into propositional coherent belief. It's a necessary condition, but even there, it's not necessarily the causative agent. It's like I just take logic, apply it, and that turns my recognition of a face into a justified coherent belief. Is
Well,
logic the agent of change there? I don't think that's established.
no, it warrants the belief. Logic is that's what I'm saying. This is a process of acquiring and warranting the belief. So you have a reason now to believe. You have a justified, reliable belief through logic. I'm sorry.
That points to a deeper ambiguity than whether this is a neutral description of the process of coming to knowledge, or whether it's how you warranty and justify beliefs.
Well, it's both. That's a description of both.
Though you kind of, yeah. But then if it's just descriptive at the level,
process. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the confusion here is you want to treat logic as the agent of change. It's the causal actor here that gets you from goal 1 to goal 2. And then you probably should use another term than logic from 2 to 3. But the fact that you want to say that logic is what does it, that itself is a claim that hasn't been warranted. You're treating it like it's a description, and you're saying this is how you get to warranted beliefs. But like maybe logic is just a necessary concomitant of moving between these different levels of certainty.
That's what it says there. Yeah, but it's a necessary non-contradictory logic. Yeah.
That's no. So here in P5, you say logic achieves goal. If and only so. But there you're saying logic is the thing that achieves the goal.
Right, and that's the issue here, right? That's right. What you're saying. That okay, well, that already achieved P4. So P4. So what achieves the goal in P5 has to be the external testing.
Well, yes, that's also true. Yeah, but even at P4, I think it could be probably rephrased. Are you still with us?
I'm still here. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you turn your camera off?
Did I? Oh no. Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me. Whoops. Am I there?
I don't see you. Nope.
Hold on. Let me. Oh, I must. Oh, I clicked the wrong thing. Okay. How do I come back?
I don't know.
Hang up and come back immediately.
You can do that. Sure.
Yeah.
This is not your typical stream, guys. I mean, say what you want about his whole system here, but we're doing something. All right. I actually really enjoy this. I mean, that's why. So, what are people saying in the chat? Folk psychology versus philosophy. Well, maybe. All right, now I can see you. Good.
Rage quit, bro. It's over.
Yeah.
No, this is good, because what's going to happen in peer review, people like you or even smarter than you are going to tear this thing apart if there's anything
so
off.
Peer review, many people think is like other experts seeing whether your idea is right or not. They're not even considering whether it's true or not true. Really? They're just looking at the formatting primarily. Like, is this structured like a proper scientific or philosophical paper?
Yeah, the logic sound or not sound? Is
well, not even. Yeah, it's not like, are the arguments valid or sound?
Right.
It's like, have you done your citations correctly? It's like, does this look like a professional scientific
so
paper?
Then it gets beat up after the peer review has been published.
Well, there's no set process unless you were like, that's what happens when you're defending your dissertation when you're graduating university. But there's no like scientific body that's just out there contesting papers once they've been peer reviewed. Once it's peer reviewed, that's basically a stamp that like the way this is formatted as a scientific paper looks about right. We don't know if it's correct or incorrect.
Oh, wow. Okay. I thought it was going to be like, these guys are like, nope, this is wrong. You suck. Do it again. Because I think they give you notes when they reject you, I think. Like, look, this premise is not good enough. Go back and do this. Because if they want to publish it in their magazine, because this is a journal. This is I don't want to name which one. They're not going to publish something they disagree with, I don't think. Because again, I put it in academia edu. There are people downloading it. Who knows what they're going through? But this is a prestigious journal of epistemology, and they're not. I don't think they're just going to accept it and print it out unless it's good for them and they agree with it. So
yeah. Some journals are harder to get into.
Right.
So, saying something is peer reviewed doesn't mean that a bunch of experts believe it's right. It just means that. A panel of people.
So, because there's all sorts of peer reviews and different studies, and this one over here, one person peer reviewed it, another one. Yeah, we know that. So basically what you're doing here is fine tooth combing it, which I wanted you to do, and I'm happy for it. So your thing is that things have to be refined. You get the point of this, you get the structure, but there's wording here that could cause problems and confusion. And you're thinking there's 3 layers. There's other knowledge there's other processes to achieve certainty that is not accounted for in this. In other words, your intuition, the feeling I mean, maybe you're right on that a little. I don't know. I think the non-contradictory logic was enough. Could have been the minimal. Doesn't it say minimally? Doesn't it say minimum in the pre?
No.
I thought it said
achieving the goal necessitates the application of a non-contradictory logic.
Yeah, if it said
you don't
minimum,
say that it.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So
okay, yeah. So there's things I can go back, because what I could do too is, once we get off this call, I can go back and make sure I could just clarify what you're saying. Let me take some notes again, because again, I want to see firstly. Okay, so your major critiques are subjective state good to go, P2 good to go. The goal of inquiry, what do you think of that? That's what's inquiry for? It's not for fun, it's to find a resolution. So really your biggest beefs are with P4, and then the fact that P4 does not transition to P5 properly, that there's 2 different goals at minimum, right? So P4 achieves the goal.
Arguably 3.
Yeah, probably 3. So you're saying P4 is problematic. Okay, problematic because why? Problematic because that's one goal.
So okay. When we are at P3, let's use like goal 1.
Yeah.
Goal 1 is just resolving into certainty when you recognize the face. That counts as the goal, because that's resolution into certainty as defined. And then when you say achieving the goal, you should be saying achieving goal 2 necessitates the application of a non-contradictory logic, where goal 2 is defined as articulating it into justified coherent belief.
Right.
So that's a transition from intuitive knowledge.
Make you a co-creator of the model, Eric. So now
that's fair. Into propositional.
Hey, listen, that's what happens here. I got to give you credit. Again, I have to go look at all this stuff, and then goal 3 would be a different knowledge. See, I thought I just thought putting JCB next to it would have been enough to say, look, this is the one step here, but there's got to be some kind of verbiage that says, wait a minute, okay, this is now
There's
from
different
this.
levels of the goal.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to make sure I go back and check that, because I think you're right. I thought this was enough to do it, because the step-by-step process, this might be actually making more. This is like a minimum process. Maybe this is too much to add more. Goal 4, goal 3. You know what I mean? It could be that it's too much. I don't know. Well, I guess I'll have to.
Well, you could change the definition of goal. It's
Yeah.
just the way you defined it. Recognizing a face satisfies that definition. But what you're talking about goes way beyond recognizing a face. So
yeah.
And then P5, when you say, this is really a stronger point than, because the other one is semantic. This is etiological or causative. You're making a causal claim. Logic achieves the goal. So first of all, it should be restated. You're not even talking about logic at the level of P5.
Yeah, exactly.
You're talking about empirical experience. And then if you kept the same phrase structure and said like empirical experience achieves goal sub 3, so
it should be testing, external testing
knowledge.
Yeah, it should be external testing achieves the goal if and only if it's reliable over time. That's something like that. Or rather, fair. Okay, P5 is achievable when JCB and external testing passes through reliability, something like that. Because I need to bring P4 with me. I got it, because I got to take that. Because remember, the coherent belief is not the end all be all when we want to know about the external world. So that's why it implies from P4 you go to P5. But when I first made this model, Eric, I only had one definition of knowledge, and that was JRB. And that's the missing component here. I didn't update the syllogism correctly. I added JCB, JRB. I need to do more. So I got to add more to P4 and P5 and maybe change the goal to 2 goals, because I have 2 warrants. So I got to give warrant 1 is this goal, warrant 2 is this goal. And I thought that was enough to just put them on the side there, JCB, JRB. And you're saying, well, no, because it could be confusing, which is a good point, because, we want to preempt these kinds of critiques. We want to avoid them, because I could explain this to someone. They go, oh, okay, I get it. But still, it's not there explicitly. And that's a problem. And in philosophy,
Now, are you claiming that to go from justified coherent belief to reliable belief, like you necessarily, let me rephrase, to go from inquiry to justified reliable belief requires passing through justified coherent belief? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you have to go from P4 and take that and then test it against reality to get a reliable belief about the external world. You can't have you have to have it. In other words, it's the final step to go outside and figure out what the world is. You can't just say, I know about the world from P4. You can't do that. That's
okay. Let's take an example. So I have like a series of cups, and there's one ball, and someone scrambled them.
Yes.
Right. Shell game. I want to know which of those cups has the ball. I test it, I lift it up, and I know at that moment, okay, the ball's not there. I've gotten, in my mind, to justified reliable belief. That seems pretty reliable to me. I don't see the ball there. It's not there. So you're saying that was achieved by passing through some kind of justified coherent belief. So what is, in that case, what's the inquiry? So here I am looking at these cups. I'm wondering, my uncertainty is the ball under the middle cup? And then walk me through where we go through the coherent belief phase.
Okay, so you know that there's cups there. Everything, all of your life experiences, it's all, you're not being like, there are no cups, right? So it's all there set up. And then from there, you have to test, okay, in order for me to find out where this cup is, I think it's in cup 1. That's your coherent belief, right? I believe after shuffling.
Do I have to have that belief though?
Well, I mean, if you don't have that belief, you watch someone.
What if I know that I missed it and I have no idea? I'm like, I wasn't even watching. I don't know where it is.
Right. That's not knowledge.
Well, that isn't. But I'm saying my goal is I'm planning on lifting up a cup and finding out if it's there or not.
P1. You're in P3, right? You're in inquiry. I don't know. You're still in inquiry. So then you go, you know what? I think it's P4 because the guy did this and I stopped his hand in the middle. I think it's there. justify coherent belief. Because why? You're justifying the fact that you saw his hands, you decided to go there. Now, maybe you're right, but you don't know. So in order to test, you pick up the cup and it's not there. Now you know after the external test that it's not there, and therefore your coherent belief
Well,
is not
yeah, but
reliable.
what if it wasn't even a coherent belief? What if like I was just looking the other way and I realized like, oh, I wasn't paying attention. Now I have no idea. I have no belief whatsoever about where the ball is. The best I can do now is just to pick up one cup and see.
But
So
that's
what's
not
the
even
coherent
like,
belief?
that's not
That's not
really,
how you play. Yeah, you're playing the shell game badly, but like I will find something out when I lift up the cup, even
but
if I didn't have a coherent belief ahead of time.
I see. Okay, so you're saying that a justified coherent belief is not necessary for extrinsic knowledge. That's what you're saying.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I have to think about that because let's see. You have well, first of all, you have to believe there's a ball to even find. See, there's still you can't escape the logic here. You see, like, okay, you don't know where the ball is, but that's your belief that you don't know where the ball is.
Yeah, you believe something. Okay,
That's
in
my point.
order
Yeah, so you have a
to
coherent
act
belief
in the
that
world, but it's not about the same thing necessarily. You're going to require coherent beliefs to act in the world and find things out,
right.
but those beliefs don't have to be beliefs about the same referent as the extrinsic knowledge that's generated. So in this case, like I have to know that there are cups.
Yes.
I have to know like basic things about how the world works. Bodies are,
Well,
impenetrable, and they don't pass through cups,
well,
etc.
here's
There
the thing,
is,
Eric. When you
yeah,
say, "Well, I don't know which one it is," that's a belief. That's a coherent belief. I don't
but
know
it's
which
not
one
the
it is.
same referent. So that's a belief about my state of knowledge.
That's
Whereas
right.
the information that I gain when I pick up the cup is knowledge about the location of the ball. So it's knowledge about different things. So it is the case that to generate any extrinsic knowledge, you're going to be operating off of some set of intrinsic beliefs, but it's not like in order to get to the final version of this knowledge, which is extrinsically backed, there was a previous coherent version of that same belief. It's going to require other coherent beliefs, but not necessarily the same belief. Or maybe when you investigate this, you'll find that technically speaking, you always have some kind of prior JCB version of a belief before you convert it to JRB. For all I know, I just from what's listed here, it doesn't tell me which of those
Yeah.
alternatives is
So
the case.
okay, let's go back to the cup argument. So you turn around, your coherent belief is not about that you have a specific cup chosen. Like, I think it's in that cup. You don't know what cup it's in, and you just go,
Mhm.
whatever. Well, it's not in the middle cup, right? You didn't
Right.
you didn't have the cognition before, like, I don't know if it's in the middle cup or not. You didn't even pick a cup. You just spun
Mhm.
around. Woo. Okay, I don't know where the hell it is. That's the belief,
Mhm.
but you didn't choose a cup to think it was in, and then you
Right.
just pick. Okay, so that, but it's still there's a coherent belief prior to that. But you're saying it doesn't match to where, but it actually does match because you still don't know which cup it's in, and then you prove that you don't know which cup it's in by picking it up and not seeing the cup.
Well, I know that it's not there now.
Yeah, but because you don't know where the cup is at all, it actually proves your coherent belief to be true because you don't know where the cup is. Now, even
Wait,
if you picked up the cup and it was under the cup, that's epistemic luck, but you didn't have that because you didn't believe you knew where the cup, where the ball was in the cup.
I think the game dynamics of the experiment or the thought experiment are not helping somehow.
Oh,
I would
I
say,
see where it is, but I'm saying that you did not have incoherent logic and say, I don't know where it is. I do know where it is. You didn't turn
yeah,
around
yeah.
and go, I know where it is and
Well,
I know where it is.
but so listen, it's like the belief when you confirm that the middle cup doesn't have the ball. The belief that you have at that point, which seems to be justified, reliable belief, is that the ball is not
In that
or
cup.
was not under this cup.
That's correct.
Exactly. But so the belief prior to that about the same thing would be I expect the ball to be under this cup
That's right.
because of these other experience. But even then, like that's I'm not sure whether that is firmly distinguished from the reliable belief because any expectation you were watching it before, that was all on the basis of testing and prediction. That wasn't like an a priori mathematical insight in your mind. So I guess it's like coherent beliefs generally are clearly prior to reliable beliefs as you've defined them, at least at some logical level. But it's not like every reliable belief is preceded by one corresponding coherent belief. I don't think there's a one-to-one
Right.
correspondence.
I think the matching of it, I get what you're saying. So again, you not knowing where the hell the ball is at all is not the same as you think it's in a left cup. And therefore, when you pick up the left cup, oh, I proved that left cup belief wrong, right? You're saying, I don't know what cup. So that these are two different inquiries in a sense, or not even inquiries. They're two different states of coherence.
Two different beliefs about different things.
Exactly. Okay. Very good. Okay, good. This is good, Eric. I like this because then we have to refine it even more, you see? So now I have to go back, refine, and probably pull it out a peer review. I could always upload a new file. But I mean, again, this is me going off what you're saying. When I go back and I really think about this, it might not change the model at all. But I do think that because I give dual warrant, I probably should have two different goals stated specifically. Because what's happening here is I think you agree with the process, but there are some parts of the process where you say, well, there's a little more to that than just non-contradictory logic. There's this intuition. And then there's two different goals, maybe even. What's the third goal you were thinking of?
So the first level is recognizing a face level. That's where you've gone from uncertainty to certainty in your mind. Yeah. No like propositional belief
that's
is
resolution,
involved.
Isn't it? Isn't that resolution?
Well, the resolution takes place prior to a proposition in your mind.
But the inquiry is like, who's that person? Okay, I see the face, resolved. That's the same thing.
We talk about that in propositional terms where you're involving logic. But I'm saying like just day-to-day recognizing objects. We're not narrating, because we do that with everything that we see. You see a part of a bush, you fill in, you expect the rest of the bush, you confirm like you're not sure about this. We're not narrating exhaustively all of those inquiry states because we inquire at a very granular level phenomenologically. Like, what is this? Look. And it happens really, really fast. We reach those states of resolution because the way that you defined a goal was moving from a state of uncertainty, resolving into a state of certainty around a mental event. Now, mental event is defined very broadly. So if that's the definition of mental event and that's the definition of goal, then by those definitions, recognizing a face or recognizing anything without stating it to yourself that would be the goal. That would be goal achieved.
Sure.
And then going from that point to justified coherent belief, that brings it to another level where you don't just want certainty in your mind, you want propositional clarity about what you're certain about. So that's going from mental certainty to propositional certainty, I guess.
It could be like an intuitive certainty, even an intuitive certainty without like a pre-logical, an intuitive certainty in a sense. Like before I even say that's Eric, I sense it. I notice it.
Yeah. Intuitive certainty, propositional certainty, and then empirical certainty.
Right.
So those are three different goals.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Now I got to give you credit. I got to put you in this model there. I got to put you in the model if this goes through. It'll actually give it a better
Fair
chance.
Enough.
It'll give it a better chance to survive if it's not just me. But I got it again. Because look, it could be that the goal being like so broad encounters. I mean, because again, we're not making any truth claims about the goal itself.
Right. And then also this order of events issue, because like I said, it's not exactly 5 premises and a conclusion and a syllogism. It is a description of a process. But then if it's a temporal description about one singular belief being formed and eventually culminating in reliable belief, knowledge, then do you move with one and the same belief from 3 to 4 to 5 in that kind of process?
Right.
Or could you go from P3 to P5 when it's just a purely empirical thing?
Well, P1 and P2 really just establish the non-circular infinite. It stops the infinite regress. That's the point of that, to escape the trilemma. We could just say, look, we started.
Those are presuppositional. Yeah. So starting from P3, Do you always move from P3 to P4 to P5 with one and the same belief that's
If it's
being...
right, well, if it's again, if we're talking about, see, the syllogism is talking about one event. So again, remember I said sitting there, something happens, explosion. You're not thinking about, is the ice cream man coming? I mean, that's another inquiry. So there's only one. Actually, you know what? No, it is one line of inquiry. Every single thing that you're inquiring has one line of inquiry to it. It's, I want to know about this explosion, and if I wanted to know if the ice cream man's at the door, that's a different line of inquiry.
But is there a coherent belief involved in all of those cases necessarily?
Well, that's inquiry. We're still at P3 when the sense conjunctions come in. So
Yeah,
then
so can you jump from P3 to P5, or do you always go through P4?
no, you have to go through you have to go through P4. You have to.
Well, I'm not, the whole cup example was examining that, and I'm not sure that you do.
Well, but you gave an example of someone not having a goal to know which cup it's in, but they still had the belief that they didn't know what the cup was in.
Yeah, they had the goal to find out, but they didn't have some prior conception of where it would be. They had no prediction. They just
But their
tried to
coherent
find
belief
out.
of they knew they didn't know. They didn't think they knew.
But that's knowledge about one's state of mind rather than the final knowledge you get about the location of the ball. So those are different beliefs. That's not one and the same belief moving through these different steps.
Sure, but the belief that you're saying I don't know is one line of inquiry, or rather one line that has to be resolved. And then you definitely don't know when you pick up the cup and don't say, I didn't know. I was right. I didn't know. And even if you did pick up the cup and the ball was there, you still didn't know. That's epistemic luck. And you didn't even believe it was in that cup. So it has nothing to, it's a whole different line of inquiry. Can I go? I gotta go to the bathroom real quick. Can I do that?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Go
Right
for it. I'm gonna read through the pentalemma. Is that what it is? I assume he knows it well enough that he doesn't need it reviewed for his own sake. Okay, so here's the Gage pentalemma, the structural defense. The Gage pentalemma is the GEM's final defense mechanism. It proves that every premise, P1 through P5, is structurally necessary and cannot be logically doubted without incurring an immediate, fatal contradiction within the framework of conscious agency. Okay, so this is justifying all 5 premises. So horn 1, performative contradiction defends... This is just the set of arguments. I don't know about a pentalemma per se. It seems like a set of arguments justifying the axioms. And again, they're not exactly premises. They're more claims. All right, so performative contradiction defends 1. Any attempt to reject the subjective state S requires the S to execute the rejection, proving the premise true in the attempt to prove it false. And I've said already, the eliminative materialist would reject that it is S executing the rejection. You know, if the self is an illusion, there is no individual, it's just a process. Rejection takes place, but S doesn't execute it. So they can still, I don't think they, like it's begging the question essentially. And it looks like, okay, I thought I was freezing for a second. All right. Horn 2, functional contradiction defends P2. Any attempt to reject, I think my computer is having a hard time actually. Okay, any attempt to reject the mental event E, doubt or awareness, requires a mental event to execute the rejection, proving the premise true. So the same argument, and it can be doubted in a similar way where you just reject that ontological account of the doubt and come up with an alternative account, but not the worst argument. Horn 3, arbitrariness defends P3. So if the agent rejects the necessity of a goal, G, for inquiry, I, the entire process of I becomes structurally arbitrary, and the agent is forced back into the dogmatism flaw of the Agrippa trilemma. Okay, so if there's no goal for inquiry to take place, if you reject that there is a goal, then anything said is arbitrary. And I think that there are 2 different senses of arbitrary being discussed here. One is like essentially random. If it's ateleological, that it's just not aimed at anything in particular. Whereas I think the sense of an arbitrary premise for Agrippa's purposes is a premise that is not justified. So two senses of arbitrarity, and then you got incoherence. Horn 4 defends P4 and JCB. So I was just going through the Pentalemma. Let's go ahead and move on to that if you're all right with it. And
no, I'm good. So I just wanted to go over the three critiques you had were there's multiple goals hidden in P3, at least 3 you're saying. So 3 different types of goal, or rather, no, you don't have a beef with P3. You do have a beef with P3 because the goals, what'd you say? You said that
we had intuitive, propositional, and empirical levels of belief.
Okay, intuitive, you had propositional, and then empirical.
Yeah.
Empirical, okay. And then, so those are 3 different goals. No, there's 3 different kinds of, I don't think intuitive is dealt with this model, but.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, well.
But anyway, if that's part of the process to building towards propositional knowledge, you still have to account for it.
Yeah, and then you said P5, the goal in P5 is no longer logic. It's the test itself.
It's not logic that achieves reliable belief. It would be testing.
But the thing is, JRB is a justified reliable belief. So we're taking the belief from P4, we're dragging it into P5. You see what I mean?
Yeah, but that's also what I kind of doubt, that it is always the case that first you have a coherent belief and then go to test it to turn it into a reliable belief. I think sometimes it might be possible to skip P4. You just skip the coherent belief stage and go straight to a reliable belief.
Okay, so you're saying that, well, no, you still need coherence to even test for example, science is P1 to P5, right? A scientist exists. He has a mental event. He has an hypothesis in P4, P3, and then he tests it with his logic, and then he does an experiment. And it has to be reliable.
Yeah, but you learn things that you didn't expect or weren't looking for. Like you could pick up the cup and there's an orange under it instead of the ball, or a whatever. And you would learn that, you would know that, but you didn't have some kind of justified coherent belief about it first. You just learned it at the level of testing.
Okay, so the coherent beliefs may not always match with the JRB. It doesn't necessarily precede the JCB doesn't always match. Well, if you don't even have a JCB, like you said with the cup. So let me just remember cup experiment.
I don't think there's a 1-to-1 correspondence of justified coherent beliefs with justified reliable beliefs.
Okay.
I think structurally, coherent beliefs are prior to reliable beliefs, but that's not like taking one belief and moving it along this chain.
That's what this is. It's a structural model of it's a structural necessary axiomatic chain. I'm sorry. It's an axiomatic chain. You see what I mean? I don't think it breaks the model though. You see what I mean?
But there's the confusion is step 1 through 5 a chronological account, or is it an account of logical priority? Because I would say that coherent beliefs are logically prior to reliable beliefs, but are all 5 premises structured in that way where it's moving from prior to posterior logically?
Yeah, I think it's P1 to P5 are necessary step by step. This is how we do it. There's no other way.
But is that chronologically or logically prior and posterior?
And they're logically connected and necessarily put in those specific orders. There's no other way. How do we do it? See what I mean?
Okay, so there's the 2 questions is it logical or chronological ordering 1 through 5, and is it one belief that moves from 1 through 5, or is it that there is this is just a general structure and beliefs may emerge at various levels and not have correlates in other levels?
So I don't know, when you say chronological and logical, to me, I mean, there's no you can do P1 last. So it has to be logically necessary in this order.
Right.
then
But it's
the
not
second,
chronologically prior per se. I mean, maybe it may happen to be,
well, again, remember
but
the premises are to deal with the trilemma. So I constructed this to defeat or dissolve the trilemma in mind. I didn't just randomly like, well, I'll just do this. I was like, okay, how do we beat this damn thing? That's why it does that. And because I was able to sidestep it, I'm able to justify the new terminology for knowledge. I have a justification other than JTB does not, where this does, because it necessarily follows from this non-arbitrary starting point. This, I call it the self-vindicating preconditions, the first ever in epistemology. No one's ever found it. Descartes was the closest to it, but he didn't go find it. So I found this position. So if anyone has the right to justify, to define knowledge, it's this model, right? And again, this is according to human limitations. We don't know the absolute truth, so we can only justify reliable beliefs, and we can only know when we're coherent.
Right.
That's all we can know.
I would still kind of contest the first two premises where you're saying more than what would be minimally self-evident, in that you are kind of invoking an object-based ontology where there is this thing, the subjective state. If you called it, there is the subjective process, that would be different. That's also kind of an issue, is terminologically. You call it the subjective state, but then up here, I believe you say that the subjective state is not static, but states are by definition static, if it's a state. So,
well, that's just a name. That's more of a name issue. It's like,
that is a terminological issue.
Yeah. You could just say, well, what I mean by subjective state is the container of consciousness.
Okay, yeah. So a different label would be. It would make some difference though, because that's kind of all we have to work. Since there's no theory of what a subjective state is, all we have to work with is the label. So what you choose to label it is kind of consequential.
Yeah, well, that's what happened when Andrew Wilson. He said, when I said P1's a brute fact, he goes, well, I reject brute facts because he's a Christian who doesn't believe, right? So that was his argument. I said, well, even though it is a fact, I think we all agree it's a fact. We all subconscious agents have, all conscious agents have a subjective state. We all have a consciousness. He could say, well, I pick on this brute fact thing, so I had to get rid of it. What I've noticed, Eric, is the best thing to do is make minimal claims to avoid all these arguments that would just waste everyone's time.
Well, I think it could be even more minimal. So here you say horn one, now we're in the pentalemma. Any attempt to reject the subjective state S requires the S to execute the rejection. And here, that is another etiological claim. It's a causal claim saying that subjective state is the actor executing the rejection. And that's actually saying a lot ontologically. That's saying what kind of thing the subjective state is. It's the kind of thing that engages as an agent in an argument to reject. And that's the same reason that cogito is packing too much in there. So I don't think we've really established that the subjective state is what does the rejecting in an argument, or is even an actor at all.
Yeah, I see it. So it does not do the rejecting. So then it would be, well, what P2's defense is the functional contradiction, right? That's what that is. That's when you say there are no mental events. The problem is, I think P1, maybe there's only 4 horns, because then you could merge P1, horn 1 and horn 2 into one. By denying mental events, you are contradicting. You can't do that. You're denying. But again, the subjective state is what grounds this. That's what I'm saying, Eric. It's a necessary start. I cannot get rid of it.
Well, but it has to be better defined then, I guess. Because if you're going to say it is the thing that executes the rejection, then that's part of the definition you're building into it.
Well, it's from there the execution is done.
Okay. But even then, like, what does that phrase mean? It's like it came from the subjective state as a container, as in like the activity was contained within the state. But then, like, what exactly does that mean? Is that like a geometric state, and the location of the action of rejecting logically was within
their own? They're denying their own consciousness. That's that's why it's a prohortative contradiction. They're denying their subjective state. Well, then they lose immediately. They can't even know anything. because all the knowing occurs within the subjective state. So when they say, we don't have subjective state, first of all, it's false. It's a false claim. We don't have a subjective state. Even.
Well,
so it's like,
if it's not well defined though, then it's sort of fair to object that we don't have it, because we don't even know what we're referring to other than a kind of, I think it needs to be better defined if it's going to be rigorous.
Listen, good. This is what I want to do. I wish we did this earlier, because if this is the case, what I'm going to do is when I get all your critiques, I'm going to run it through Gemini again and see what it says.
You can just give Gemini the transcript, I guess.
I can give this whole argument. No, but if these are critical, look, Eric's right. You should have. Then you are a co-author in a sense, if you wanted to go through with that. But I don't know if you want to. But either way,
it doesn't matter to me. An acknowledgement would be fine.
Well, no, because when two philosophers, and you're like the real one, and I'm like the pseudo one, whatever. When they do this together, because this is what could happen, Eric. For example, I put my paper out there. Some other guy like you says, "Uh-oh, fuck this. This is all," and they do a better version, and then they take all. That's what will happen. Because Descartes didn't go deep enough. Well, thanks, Descartes. I'll go deeper. This is similar. You see? So if you're helping me do this, well, let's suppose I run this and he goes, this is already taken care of within the premises. Then it's different. But this actually, this is critical. That's another story. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't mind sharing this or working together on this, because again, I'm cooked in the philosophy world anyway. I got banned on Reddit for not even violating the rules. You see? So I'm persona non grata, man. So I'd rather, I don't want these people who control this country to nuke me from everything, so this doesn't get out there. If this is truly an historic feat or whatever the case, it needs to be known.
Right. Well, that's sort of the other aspect of, if you want to call it criticism. I'm not really sure exactly how unique it is or what degree of accomplishment. I think it's very important for you to clarify your epistemology, and it's clarifying your thinking, and it's I fully support what you're doing. I don't know that I'm convinced that it's necessarily a historical accomplishment, because I've seen similar accounts of how we justify beliefs, that they have to be coherent with themselves, consistent with external evidence, according with logic and everything. The particular formulation, I don't know if it's so tight that it's this is the one and only best way to formulate it. I also haven't done a lot of research into how exactly these things have been formulated by others. I do know Plato's account, and maybe I would just respond from. So everything I've been doing so far, we've just been looking at your paper, looking at the points you're making, and I'm kind of offering questions and criticisms and seeing how you respond to things. But then obviously I have a vested interest in my own philosophical views.
You got the Plato bias.
Yeah. And so I looked at your metaphysics paper on Substack, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you should probably read some more Plato and the Neoplatonists, and you'll get that Plato isn't so much of a strict dualist as he's often portrayed to be. That's Nietzsche's big problem with Plato, but most scholars of the classics don't think that Nietzsche was accurate in his criticisms or assessment. So anyway, a lot of people would characterize Plato as a monist himself. And so, but anyway, what I wanted to bring out, so in Platonism, the axioms that we're relying on are grounded not just in the fact of subjective experience and not just in logic. There's something in between that. So in Platonic terms, the soul comes together at its highest point, the henad of the soul, or the unity of the soul. That's what I identify with consciousness. So if I was going to define what can't be denied, I would say there is a unity to conscious experience that makes anything else that it does possible. And then beneath that, before you get to logic, which is discursive, mathematical type structure, you have the noetic, intuitive, intellective structuring principles. And there's actually a gradient between that, from from what unifies the soul to what is the highest order noetic principles structuring everything that happens phenomenologically, empirically, all of it, down to the more fine-grained mathematical stuff. So it's not so much that like there is this thing logic and then there is this thing subjectivity. It's actually a spectrum of the same like ontological substrate, just moving from a one to a many. And they broke those down, and the actual science in Platonic terms is the dialectical method, where you divide up those natural kinds in that metaphysical hierarchy in the correct way. And that's where the real work philosophically remains to be done, and that's what the Neoplatonists tried to do. And what that gives you, trying to break it up into a really well-defined hierarchy tracing this whole spectrum, is that the way that you justify beliefs won't just be appealing to non-contradiction, which maybe that is a minimal criteria. I don't know if it's the one and only minimal criteria. It shouldn't just like logically cohere. There should also be logical entailment involved, preferably in beliefs. And the way that entailment differs from coherence in logic is important. But these fine distinctions, I think, allow us to account for what's happening when we acquire knowledge in these different domains. Like in math, Proclus has a really good essay dealing with this somewhere. I forget actually which essay, but he talks about like the various types of intuition. There are intuitions of very broad structuring principles like beauty, justice, etc. And we know about those across many different domains and recognize beauty in many different domains. And then there are intuitions that aren't logical operations, but they're at the foundation of the various mathematical sciences. And that's how they get to the particular axioms that they do in geometry or the other sciences. So the epistemological method there that they're putting forward, Plato describes actually in his second letter as, Plato's concept of what knowledge actually is. Remember, he was the one who originally came up with the idea of justified true belief and then rejected justified true belief as inadequate. And that's because the way that we know things can't fully be transmitted propositionally. The knowledge is going to be some kind of insight into the nature of the forms. In his seventh letter, he goes from there's 5 different steps. When you're getting to know something, you have a name that you call it. You have knowledge of its constituents. So basically empirical knowledge, coherence, these essential steps. And then once you have exhaustive etiological accounts, like fully justified true belief, you know the nature of the thing, how it differs from other things, you explain how it came to be, fully mapped out model. Even that is not knowledge. That's where you've trained yourself. It's a virtue epistemology. You've trained yourself to the point where now you have a chance of intuiting the essence of the thing. And when you actually gain access to that essence, you have indubitable certainty about things, and more than just your own existence, but like the axioms in geometry. You can actually reach a point where you get indubitable access to necessary essences that then ground metaphysically and epistemologically all the more particular claims in the various sciences.
But that would sound like experiencing it. That would sound like experiencing a shape, in a sense, like not just knowing it and its angles. It's almost like having a trip about, you know what I'm trying to say?
I think a good example or analogy would be, so you're creating this constellation with your theories about the world in your mind, and you have all these theoretical objects, and they're all kind of, I'm going to place this here and account for this by this structure. And then when you actually intuit the form, it's like you're tapping into the structuring principle that gave rise to everything that you're recognizing. And it's this global, locking into place where now you don't have to rely on this inference or that empirical experience. Now you actually intuit the global structure, the whole through line of how all of this came to be in the first place. And it's that one form that goes across the many.
And so you're saying once you know the forms, you don't even have to do external testing because you know the nature of all things.
Well, yeah,
In
sort
a
of. I
sense,
mean,
yeah. If you know the
you would
blueprint of
rely,
if you know
yeah.
the blueprint of the universe, what we don't, that's what I think we cannot know.
But
You
why do you
know,
think we can't know it?
I don't think we can achieve that. We'd have to be
But how would you know that
omniscient.
you couldn't?
I don't know. That's what I'm just saying. That's my justified coherent
The
belief. I wouldn't know, Eric. That's a really big to know the. It's like knowing the logos personally, right? That's like a Jesus Christ argument.
mhm.
If he is the truth with the capital T, that's because in my infrastructural polarity, that is the logos in my model, and it's intrinsic, and it actually goes outward, and it's an external structure that compels the structural part of the universe to do what it does. And it's and there's this well, that's all metaphysics, but it's all speculation. But anyway, so I don't know if we can know, like, was that Gödel's incompleteness theorem that a
Yeah.
system can't know it's so even we don't even know our own consciousness because we operate from
Well,
it,
Gödel used that argument to justify what I just claimed, that you can actually intuit axioms. So the whole idea is that you can't have a system that is coherent and complete exhaustively. Any coherent logical system, there's
Mhm.
going to be truths about it that can't be justified from
By
its own
itself. Yeah,
premises.
right.
Yeah, so there are all these auxiliary truths that no matter what formal system we're dealing with, we're going to be able to recognize. And Gödel claimed that is the case because we aren't just dealing with algorithmic stepwise processes. We're not just dealing with that kind of calculative reasoning. Instead, we know an unlimited number of propositions about all of these statements, even if they can't be proved, because we're relying on a higher intuition. And only mathematicians actually get access to that intuition because they train themselves. It's a
Right.
virtue epistemology. So when we say like we can't have access to the knowledge of the structure and principles of the universe, well, maybe we just haven't done the necessary training. How would you know the difference?
But we
It's
can
like
detect
I
it.
could say it's impossible for a man to lift 500 pounds,
Yeah.
because I can't do it. But then I just don't know that it requires a lot of training
Well,
that I haven't
I
done.
don't think we could experience it. I mean, we could like map it out like mathematics. I mean, look, why is the universe intelligible? Because it's determined. So we can, once we know part of it, we can extrapolate and say, okay, this is algebra. We can do this calculation. This should land over here during a gravity. And that's because it's a determined universe. If it were not, if it were arbitrary, we'd have no laws of physics. So, with that because look, that mathematics is like the logos, it's the structure of the universe. So we can make these. That's what they can say. Look, this model says there should be a black hole over there. Oh, we found it. That's the beauty of math, right? It kind of predicts the structural polarity of my model. That's why I use it in IP. So, I mean, I guess if the forms exist like you claim, then if you knew the forms, yeah, how do we get to those forms if they're outside space time or beyond our comprehension, or it's
You first
untestable?
first you study math, and
Yeah.
then studying math teaches your intuition how to correctly ascertain the mathematical axioms. So there's the intuitive structure of mathematical systems, not the algorithmic stepwise
Mhm.
structure. It's easy to understand the stepwise procedures, but it's hard to intuit the axioms. And only a trained mathematician can come up with Euclid's axioms or any set of axioms.
I see. Okay. So that there's an intuition that gives birth to these truths. Well, rather it discovers them in a way,
Yeah,
like they're out there. So the
yeah.
one it's like sensing the force. It's like I've trained myself to meditate where I can now hear things that I couldn't hear before, type of thing. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
that kind of thing, like X-Men. You're training your powers at Dr. Xavier's mansion, right? You're
Yeah.
amplifying. You're learning to control them.
In the Phaedrus, he talks about this path of ascent and descent, where you move first from particulars, you gain experience of individual men, and
Yeah.
then you start to kind of profile and see there are different types of men out there. And then you start noticing these same, like there are just men and unjust men, and then you see there are just states and unjust states, and you see there the deeper structure and principle it scales up and up and up. And then when you finally ascend to what's the ground of justice, where do these principles come from, and what's like the principle of everything else? Well, then you grasp the global structure, period, of reality. And then as you descend, now that you have that model, descending back down and generating theories and dealing with particulars, you're going to be more accurate. you
Yeah,
know?
I mean that's like you're kind of like you're going into a realm of information that no one's accessing, and then you come back to Earth, but you can't know all of it. That's what I'm saying. We can't know the total truth. We can know parts of the truth. I think you're right, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's that's what I'm saying. The capital T truth for a finite entity like ourselves. Can we truly know? And even if we had it right, we wouldn't actually know we had it right for sure.
But maybe it would like deliver some kind of absolute certainty that we're not used to. But if you trained yourself and had that intuition of the form, like it would just disclose itself completely, indubitably, where it's beyond doubt. Like we have not been in those states, so we don't know what it would be like. But how do you know that it's impossible to get into that state?
I don't know. It's
Yeah.
impossible. Yeah.
So I think this model is claiming more than it is able to claim, and saying that this is the only way you can get justified.
I'm not making any truth claims. It's just saying this is how we warn our beliefs. This is a justification. This is the how we acquire knowledge and warn our beliefs, according to my definition of knowledge. According to this system's definition. If you have like some other type of knowledge, then maybe this doesn't apply. But that you'd have to demonstrate everything you just said to be true, like the forms and the state of mind that you're talking about.
Well,
You see what I mean?
sorry. In the paper, so you say the successful execution of the pi syllogism establishes the structural standard for all knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
because I define it as intrinsic and extrinsic. That's it. There's only two.
right. But a justified coherent belief, like what if knowledge of the forms applied there, but it's not logical, it's intuitive?
I don't know if is intuition knowledge. I mean, that's kind of like an inquiry, isn't it? Intuition is not. I don't think intuition is like. I don't even think truth is knowledge. Like knowledge, what is not knowledge is
Well,
acquiring. It's a process.
there's different levels of intuition. There's like a gut hunch, which is not knowledge,
Right.
but then the intuition that you use to grasp axioms, or so like the Kantian sense of intuition is a structuring principle of the mind. So as one of the first like proto phenomenologists, he's analyzing the structure of our minds and saying these are the intuitive breaks, like the categories quantity versus say time or quality or whatever other category we're drawing phenomenologically. Those
These are the
those are
intuitions that
intuitive.
lead
Yeah,
to,
those are intuitions of the pure understanding. That's the Kantian sense.
right. So
So
he's intuiting that these things, his intuition turned into a logical description. That's what
yes,
just happened. So it
right.
was a pre-logical. It was not logical. There's a feeling like when I did the whole like there's something wrong with tag, that was a logical expression, but the intuition that there's something wrong with it. There was no explanation as to what was wrong with it, but I felt like there was something wrong with it.
No, that's still the gut hunch. So the
That's the
difference
gut
is,
hunch. Okay, so
yeah.
this is a
The
hard thing to
that level
explain.
of intuition is like I'm making a prediction and I'm going to rely
Right.
on my intuition in that sense.
Okay.
The other kind of intuition is like you're analyzing the structure of your mind and you perceive the structure of your mind. When you like disclose a mathematical axiom, you are, because math is what our brains operate on. It's what physics operates on, right? It's
But is
the
intuition the
necessary
correct
structure.
word? Is intuition
Well,
the correct
that's
word?
like the Kantian term for it, and
Yeah.
in a broader sense, the Platonic term. So it's consistent with philosophical usage. Yeah, there's
Okay.
this higher sense of intuition, which is you are perceiving the structure of your mind, or at a deeper level, the necessary structuring principles of reality.
Okay. All right. So that's a different thing. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if, again, these are untestable things. I don't know if the model deals with that. I don't like, again,
Yeah,
I'll go back and I'll go over everything we said today
right.
because I do believe that because when I turn knowledge into two different definitions, then that could be confusing when there's not two goals there. That has to be explicit.
Sure.
And then G needs to be changed for 5 for sure in some way. So there's things I could, and then hopefully I could pull it out of peer review. It didn't get, the admissions office is looking into it. It hasn't been set to, because this takes months, Eric. It takes like 2 to 4 months. So I could
honestly, the biggest thing I think standing between you and peer review would be the phraseology of the syllogism and premises. I think you need to clarify in the way that you lay it out what exactly you're saying. Is it a chronological sequence of events that you have to go through to get
But
to good
wouldn't this even
beliefs,
be an
or is
affirmative?
it,
If
huh?
it's not an argument, should he even be in this format?
Well, yeah, it doesn't seem like an argument in the
It's not an
traditional
argument.
sense
Yeah,
to
it's not an
me.
argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then it's not a syllogism, because
But it
syllogisms are
is, but
arguments.
it is arguing against. Well, it's to dissolve the trilemma and to redefine knowledge. That's what it's doing essentially. So do you? I have to argue against the trilemma. I'm not even arguing against. It's not like the trilemma is false, right? It's not like saying P1, da da da. Therefore, the trilemma is a false trichotomy.
Hmm.
That would be an argument against the trilemma. So perhaps this entire paper has to be rewritten into some other, I don't know, form. I guess. This is all
Yeah.
new. Listen, I'm learning as I'm going. That's the
Uh-huh.
funny part.
That's fine.
This is my hey. This is that intuition you're talking about, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm in the form level over here doing this because
Hmm.
again, I don't know how I got to this point.
Well, I think you're benefiting from it. I think your thinking is becoming clearer by
Oh
going
yeah,
through the exercise. And ultimately, that's what philosophy is about. It's like you can write papers and have credit for ideas, but if you are not getting any closer to gnosis, then
right.
why
Yeah,
bother? So, um, I think we could probably wrap up here. We could look at
yeah.
the rest of the tetralemma, but yeah, we've really looked at a lot of angles here. I do like it. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a very good, at least a really good start for your statement. And maybe you could clarify, what kind of knowledge in particular, what its scope is. You say it's like good for science. I would argue there that scientific reasoning will invoke philosophical forms of knowledge that don't conform exactly to your definitions of coherent or reliable belief. Because again, I have that Platonic
Yeah.
notion of axiomatic truth.
Platonic racism is what you have.
I do. I do. Um,
Platonic supremacy over here.
Yeah, so I think like resonating with archetypes is involved in good scientific practice as well. And so I wouldn't necessarily say like philosophy has this domain over here. I think it's
Mm.
involved in the scientific process.
Yeah, I don't discard philosophy. Like I went on a tangent. Like, what do these philosophers ever do but make more problems than answers and questions? And look what science has given us. But science still operates with thinking of why do scientists have any hypotheses? Where's that? That's not a scientific thing. Like there's still intuition involved. Like these people may be tapping into higher things to even think about these things. And a lot of these, Steve Jobs, they took LSD. They like, what was the other one? It was Steve Jobs. It was Sheldrake is a big one with the morphic resonance. He was a big guy in India doing the meditation and also the shrooms with Terence McKenna. There's something else out there. No, I think some kind of intelligibility, but yeah, no, I don't discard philosophy completely, of course, but I don't. I think that it has been paralyzed by this justified true belief for the last 2,000 years. That's a big problem. I don't think there
Hmm.
isn't absolute truth, but I don't think we can obtain it. You think we can? I don't know how. Maybe you should write a step by how to do it. I don't know if Plato did it. Maybe there's a
Yeah, Plato
process.
did it.
He did. Okay.
The seventh letter. Um, yeah, I mean, that's why I just teach Platonism, because I think he basically solved all the major problems. I do have my own philosophical views, not so much on epistemology. I don't think I've developed beyond the ancients. I think in terms of metaphysics and epistemology, they did a really good job. I think they didn't have empirical data like we have, so their physics wasn't as good. But like they had brains as big as ours. They were basically the same as us. Arguably, they had harsher selective pressures. So when it comes to like the form of pure thought and these sorts of things, like why would they not be able to access all these truths and think very deliberately about these things? Um, but but yeah, so I think it's important also just to know the history of the tradition in order to engage with it well. So it's part of it is like you're learning all these technical terms, and there is a benefit in having like a layman's perspective. But another part is uh engaging with the tradition will change you as well. I used to have this criticism of like philosophy professors. Everyone
Mhm.
just teaches the history of philosophy. Like no one
Yeah.
actually engages in the modern day, or hardly anyone. But and I still do to some extent. But anyway, I think there's definitely value in going back to those other perspectives. because if not for no other reason, like you want to get out of modernity with its many problems. Like our way of thinking is flawed deeply. Obviously, we're
Sure.
driving ourselves extinct as a race for
Yep.
one.
Yeah.
So let's refer to the people who actually built up the civilization and what were their original ideas.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, they had a lot of time to think too, where a lot of us were just distracted, wasting our time and doing things that are. I mean, me on Twitter, I almost wish I was banned so I can go back to Substack. Like, there's a lot of things that drain our energies, Eric, and that's the thing. Like, you're
yeah,
building a community, so you have a lot of important stuff to do there. I think my career, and it's pretty much over, which is fine. I've done everything I could. So I kind of accidentally stumbled upon philosophy, and I would love to go into this, but I feel like because of who I am, I'm just going to be completely censored. That's my biggest
hmm.
concern is censorship, man. If they censored my stupid ass song that went around the world, billions of people, but this should be respected more. You know what? They did that because the song said certain things they didn't like. This should be like, hey, this is humanity. This is a philosophical endeavor. And I asked Gemini, I said, what if I didn't beat the trilemma? That I still, he's like, well, you still accomplished scientific justification. You still did this. I still did. It's not nothing what I've done. You know what I mean? But even if
Hmm.
I don't, well, I didn't. I think I have defeated it or dissolved it. But like you said, it may not be historic as you think. I don't know. I think it is because I'm confident in it. But even if it's not, it still did something. It's still going to move the
Yeah.
bar. It's making epistemology check itself. Yeah, you know what? JTB is unjustified. It's arbitrary. We should reject that. The pragmatists were correct, but they didn't have they were circular. But this one's not. This transcends the trilemma. Let's go with this model and build upon that. So even if I don't do what I think I did, others can do it. Like you sat here and you said,
Hmm.
"Look, good, okay, great, that's awesome. Let's refine it even more. Let's make it stronger." So every time I've interacted with yourself or other people, I come back and say, "Oh, that's a good point." So anyway, I think we've
Right.
accomplished what we wanted to do here. It's good
Yeah,
stuff.
definitely.
Yeah,
Awesome. P5 at work, right?
yeah, that's right.
All
So
right. Well, good. Do you want to leave the audience with anything in particular,
does anyone
last
have any
comments,
questions
or?
about this whole thing? No questions.
Well,
Anyone?
entropy wasn't working, so I didn't set it up.
Uh,
And there's been a lot of comments actually, but I'm not going to dig through looking for
okay.
questions. People, you have like 1 or 2 minutes. If you have a burning question of Lucas, go ahead. Other than that, let people know what you're doing and where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, I'm just on X. If you go to my bio.site/Lucas Gage, it has all the stuff there. I wrote a new book right here, Our Struggle. It's a very good book. It's about our struggle as a people. That's been selling very well. But my reach is completely cooked. I can't help anyone like I used to, so that bothers me. I'm also on Rumble. I'm on X at Lucas Gage X. My website's lucasgage.com. That's just all my links. So you just go there and find me. But I'm usually on just X doing my thing here. But I do want to do more philosophy, and that's why I've been doing this thing for the last month and a half. Still no car. Still no car from since 2 months now. Still no car, man. Crazy. But that's what I'm doing, guys. I'm just on X and I'm on Rumble, and honestly, this is getting repetitive, and I really want to do something else. But our struggle, our fight is still there. Our people are at risk. There's a lot of problems that we face, even internally. You saw what's going on, so there's a little rough edges here, but I think we'll be okay. We got to just keep moving forward, and like what you're doing is important. What other people are doing is important, and that's the thing. It's like, what next? We have to get off the internet. I've been on it for a while. Listen, I've done in real life groups twice. I actually did two of them. But now I'm like, okay, what do I do? Do I run for Congress? What's that going to do?
Hmm.
Raise $500,000 and lose because that's what's going to happen, right? And plus my history and I'm persona non grata. That's not going to work. So what can I do? All I can do is try to help you guys and other people. I try to help Keith. I try to help everyone I can, but without my reach like I used to have, I'm losing my potency there. So it's sad to see, but at least others are excelling. Like you're getting attention, you're getting on the CNN and other media, and people are growing. Your organization's growing, and I helped as much as I could. You know that. So as long
You
as
helped
I
a
know
lot. Yeah,
yeah, as long
big
as I
time.
know I've done my part. I mean, maybe it's time for me to just relax. After 13 years. So, but I go with the flow. Right? I'm like a Taoist, right? I go with the flow in a way.
Hmm.
Let the nature take over at will. So
So someone does ask, can they read the paper? I will add in the description the link to the
mhm.
paper. You can download it. And then someone asks, do you consider your core basis to be your persona, name, ego? Or what's your core basis? I'm not exactly sure what they mean.
I don't know if they mean like what is our identity? Like, do I identify with the ego? I don't identify with the ego. The ego is
Mhm.
like it's like a mechanism for survival. I identify
Mhm.
with the subjective state, right? I
Mm.
like, because look, what is the ego? Well, you can observe your thoughts. So who's doing that? That's what you really are. That conscious, you're that consciousness that observes the thoughts, has the feelings. It's your body. Well, who's your? That's what you are. That's what you are. I don't know if that's a soul or if that's emergent. I don't know. That's a different argument, but you are that which you
Mhm.
can observe.
Oh, well, lost him. Okay. Seem to have lost my video as well, which is odd. Mhm. Got the room title. Dang. All right, then. I suppose we'll just call it a wrap. Let me come back on at least real quick, because that's too odd. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not going to try to fix this. We were just wrapping up. So if anyone wants to read the paper, in description. And yeah, we'll probably talk more about metaphysics in the future. You can check out his Substack and much more to discuss. Obviously, I don't endorse everything he does or says or stands for universally. I think he's a good guy. I think he's well intentioned. So that's why I like having him on, talking to him. And the same goes for anyone else who I believe is really seeking the truth. And when you care and you're trying to find out what's true, you're going to have really strong convictions and moral stances and sometimes piss people off. And Lucas has done that, but who hasn't? So